Chapter 843. The newcomer had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He was the sect master of the East Heaven Gate, a Tao integration powerhouse, Xiao Dongtian. The old man behind him was the Grand Elder of the East Heaven Gate, a void return powerhouse, Tao Venerate Dongming. Zhang Enrui smiled. Sect Master Xiao, you're too kind. He brought the wine cup to his lips and took a sip. Then, he smiled. Other than Zhu Yi, who is somewhat related to you, the other three of the four heroes of the Celestial Sect are also extraordinary. Xiao Yan, the eldest disciple of the Celestial Sect's sect master, is extremely talented. He can actually cultivate 5 types of true fire at the same time, which is unprecedented. He can even fuse different true fires. The degree of violence of this mystical power can be said to be the best among the various mystical powers cultivated by the 4 heroes of the Celestial Sect. I dare say that any void return cultivator would have to be careful if they encountered him, let alone a primordial spirit embodiment realm cultivator. At the very least, this Xiao Yan can fight to the death. In the eyes of the primordial spirit embodiment realm powerhouses, Zhu Yi was the strongest among the 4 heroes of the Celestial Sect, but Xiao Yan was the most annoying. This was because the instant explosive power of the firmament fire lotus would cause Xiao Yan to lose his combat power and be trampled upon for a short period of time. The problem was that almost no opponent of the same level could withstand his explosive power. Even people who were a bit stronger than him, as long as they weren't strong enough to crush him, Xiao Yan at the very least would be able to end up in mutual destruction. This was a very unreasonable thing. If you can withstand my attack, then I'll lose. If you can't, then I'll blast you to death. You're stronger than me. As long as you're not too much stronger, you'll still be at the bottom of my coffin. Zhang Enrui poured himself another cup of wine. The 3rd disciple of the Celestial Sect's master, Wang Lin, has a Dharma treasure called the mysterious Sky God's Sealing Flag. If it can only imprison primordial spirit embodiment realm cultivators, then it's fine. If it can imprison void return cultivators, then it'll be a little more interesting. In that case, his combat ability will probably surpass most void return cultivators. If void return cultivators don't have Dharma treasures, then I'm afraid they'll be at a disadvantage. As he laughed, Zhang Enrui glanced at Tao Master Dongming, who was standing behind Xiao Dongtian. Tao Lord Dongming also smiled faintly. His gaze swept across the area behind Zhang Enrui. There stood the cultivators of the human Tao, and there was also a return to void stage mighty figure among them. However, everyone knew that the human path cultivators of the reincarnation sect were very weak in actual combat. Zhang Enrui was not offended and continued with a smile. As for the disciple of the Mystic Gate's master, there's no need to say more. He has 2 creation divine lights and has been in and out of Tianhuang mainland for the past few years. There's news that he once killed a demon sage in the mid-stage of the Yuanying realm and severely injured a Swanee, cutting its flesh. Someone has seen him in the void battlefield. He has already successfully cultivated the Dharma idol and advanced to the late Yuanying realm. He even heavily injured a primordial true spirit realm great demon. I wonder if he has returned. If I do return, I'm sure I'll have few opponents below the Tao integration stage. Tao Sovereign Dongming smiled and said, Sect Master Zhang is definitely not afraid. Zhang Enrui laughed. That might not be the case. I've never been good at fighting, but I can boast that I'm the best in wine tasting. Let's stop chatting. We should head down. Shi Tianfang, who had been silent all this while, said, the people from Shu Mountain will definitely arrive, but there's no need to wait. Xiao, Zhu, Wang, and Shi are indeed extremely talented, but they're still a little immature before they reach the essence soul stage. The Mystic Gate's master is not on the mountain, so the most difficult thing to deal with on Yujing Mountain right now is still the protective array and the double pole sky peak at the Mahayana stage. However, they're not a problem. As Shi Tianfang spoke, he was already walking toward Yujing Mountain. Xiao Dongtian stopped for a while longer before moving forward as well. The few of them were in the mood to chat here, but it was not because they had time to spare. Instead, they were using their divine senses to continuously probe and analyze the defensive restrictions on Yujing Mountain. After getting a rough idea of the situation, they would immediately take action. As Shi Tianfang walked, he looked at Xiao Dongtian. His eyes flickered slightly. No wonder you're willing to be a pawn for the great Zhou this time. Not only you, but even Dao Master Dongming came with you. You've really benefited a lot from the great Zhou dynasty. Black Heaven Seal, you've fallen from the incarnation stage since the destruction of the heavenly gates in the ancient times. Now that you've finally returned to the Mahayana stage, it's really worth celebrating. A brilliance flashed beside Xiao Dongtian, and the void opened up. A man in black walked out. He had a square face and looked dignified. On his right palm was a pitch-black ancient seal. It was one of the 9 treasures of the ancient heavenly gates, the Northern Black Heaven Seal. Compared to when he was still at the peak of the incarnation stage in the Ying Ocean, the current Black Heaven Seal did not exude much terrifying aura. However, the vast and majestic feeling was even more vast. Looking at this pitch-black ancient seal, it was as if looking at the sky above his head. Seeing the Black Heaven Seal, light and shadow flickered above Shi Tianfang's head. A huge, slowly spinning roulette appeared in the void. The roulette was evenly divided into 6 pieces. Each piece was different in color, and there were all kinds of carvings on it. Those carvings looked firm and deep, but they were constantly changing. The white piece emitted a gentle light. Ethereal figures appeared on the carvings one after another. Although their specific appearances could not be seen clearly, all of them had a kind of ethereal, aloof, solemn, and sacred feeling. At the same time, they showed the rising and falling of the sun and moon, the alternation of the stars, the growth of all living things, and other phenomena of the world. They seemed endless and mysterious. The blood-colored piece was dark and murderous. It was extremely oppressive and made people feel crazy and bloody. It was as if it could awaken the purest killing intent in the depths of everyone's heart. The figures on the carvings were entangled and attacked each other. Their killing intent soared into the sky. The black piece showed layers of hell. There were blazing flames, quicksand, ice, mountains of knives, snakes. It was a scene of endless suffering in hell. It made people feel deep despair when they saw it, and they could only numbly sink into it. The green piece was engraved with many twisted human faces. Jealousy, pain, resentment, rage, sorrow. Countless resentful and malevolent faces, countless mournful and hungry ghosts, opened their mouths and roared incessantly. The purple piece had carvings of all kinds of animals. The smaller ones were snakes, insects, rats, ants, pigs, dogs, cows, and sheep. The bigger ones were rhinoceros, elephants, and even dragons, Kuan Peng, Great Peng. There were so many of them. The last piece was colorful, and the carvings changed the fastest. It exuded a feeling of the myriad changes of the mortal world. Among the many carvings, one could vaguely see cities and villages, joys and sorrows, love and hate, and all kinds of human entanglements. It was as if there were 6 layers of heaven and earth, 6 worlds, and 6 kinds of laws and principles. They rotated slowly and ceaselessly. At the center of the 6 pieces of the roulette, a human face appeared. It looked calmly at Xiao Dongtian, the Black Heaven Seal, and Dongming Dao Venerate. Slowly, Xiao Dongtian nodded and said, "The 6 Paths Wheel." The 6 Paths Wheel was the treasure of the reincarnation sect. It was a peak Mahayana level treasure and the natal treasure of the reincarnation Taoist. After the reincarnation Taoist died, the 6 Paths Wheel existed in the reincarnation sect's heavenly path. Its existence was also one of the reasons why the heavenly path was known as the strongest of the 6 paths. Even the Black Heaven Seal frowned when he saw the treasure. He was not afraid of the 6 Paths Wheel when he was at his peak, but now that he had just returned to the Mahayana level, he was a little less confident against the 6 Paths Wheel. Silently, the human face in the center of the 6 Paths Wheel said, "Let's finish this quickly. Let the battle Azura join us." Shi Tianfang nodded and drew a line in the air with his right hand. Suddenly, a blood-red crack appeared in the air. It was like a spatial wound, and blood was dripping out. Slowly, a jet-black saber emerged from the blood-red crack. It was filled with a shocking killing intent. Even in the reincarnation sect's camp, some of the weaker nascent divinity incarnation cultivators felt restless. A strong desire to kill rose from the bottom of their hearts. Only after circulating their mana did they manage to stabilize their state of mind and quell the killing intent in their hearts. Xiao Dongtian's expression remained unchanged, but Dao Venerate Dongming frowned. The saber's killing intent was so strong that it did not even need to release its own aura to drive most of the cultivators below the nascent divinity level into a frenzy. They would be devoured by the killing intent in their hearts and turn into madmen who only knew how to kill. A hand appeared on the saber's hilt. It belonged to a young man dressed in black. He had a head full of blood-red hair. His eyes shone with a red light that thirsted for battle and slaughter. Apart from the 6 Paths of Reincarnation sect's 6 Paths of Reincarnation sect, the Shura battle saber. Originally, it belonged to the Azura Tao of the 6 Paths of Reincarnation. The Heavenly Tao had the 6 Paths wheel, and the Azura Tao had invested a huge amount of resources into the Azura saber, raising it from the incarnate level to the Mahayana level. Only then was it able to withstand the pressure from the 6 Paths wheel. However, after Shi Tianfang and the others defeated the Azura Tao, Mo Shulua was imprisoned, and the 6 Paths of Reincarnation were unified. The Azura battle saber finally chose to submit to Shi Tianfang. This time, it accompanied him to Yujing Mountain. 2 Tao integration cultivators, 2 Mahayana Dharma treasures, and a group of powerful cultivators like the Sky Ghost Taoist made Xiao Dongtian, the Black Heaven Seal, and Tao Venerate Dongming seem a little weak. However, Xiao Dongtian did not care. The existence of him and the Black Heaven Seal was the source of his confidence. Whether it was attacking Yujing Mountain now or facing Lin Feng in the future, the reincarnation sect could not shake him off. Moreover, he had the great Zhou dynasty behind him. Shi Tianfang did not plan to fight alone. He looked at Xiao Dongtian and said calmly, "I can give you the embryo of the creation artifact from the Yingzhou Immortal Mountain, but the reincarnation sect will take the Yujing Mountain." As far as the outside world knew, apart from Yingzhou Immortal Mountain and Yinghai, the most valuable things in Xianmen Tianzong were Yujing Mountain and the Creation Dharma Treasure Embryo White Jade Pillar. The Reincarnation Sect and the East Heavenly Gate each had one. This was also one of the reasons why Shi Tianfang did not wait for the Mount Shu Sword Sect. As for how the treasures would be divided, it would depend on the strength of each sect. The Reincarnation Sect had sent out almost all of their forces, so Shi Tianfang naturally wanted to get the biggest share. This time, he had actually come for Yujing Mountain. It would be best if he could get the other treasures, but his main goal was this immortal mountain that could allow him to freely travel between the heavens. Chapter 844. Xiao Dongtian sneered inwardly at Shi Tianfang's suggestion. Whoever occupied Yujing Mountain could be like Lin Feng in the past, able to attack and defend at will. After this battle, once Lin Feng returns, it can be said that the families will join forces to suppress or even kill him whose strength has greatly decreased, but those who occupy Yujing Mountain, if they want to fight, they can fight. If they don't want to fight, they can just abandon the others and run away, letting the remaining people bear Lin Feng's wrath. However, the reincarnation sect was too powerful, so Xiao Dongtian didn't argue with him. After all, the final result would only be known after the battle. Even if Lin Feng wasn't here, Xianmen Tianzong wasn't weak either. Who knew what would happen after the battle? The main reason for the agreement now was to avoid internal strife before the allied army had even truly fought with the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Xiao Dongtian smiled. "I have no objections to Sect Master Shi's suggestion." Shi Tianfang nodded. He knew what Xiao Dongtian was thinking. Whether the agreement was fulfilled or not depended on the strength of the two sides. But he was confident that even after the battle, he could still suppress East Heaven Gate. Mount Shu Sword Sect, on the other hand, would be hard to deal with. "Let's finish this quickly." Shi Tianfang made up his mind. He descended towards Yujing Mountain with the 6 paths wheel and the Shura saber. Zhang and Rui, the Sky Ghost Taoist, and the other reincarnation sect experts followed closely behind. Xiao Dongtian, Xian Tianyin, and Dao Master Dongming didn't plan to sit back and watch. Instead, they rushed towards Yujing Mountain with the reincarnation sect experts. Although Lin Feng wasn't here, Xianmen Tianzong couldn't be underestimated. This wasn't the time for them to sit back and watch. When they got close to Yujing Mountain, countless rays of light flickered in the air above the mountain peak. They formed a strange pattern with strange trajectories and patterns. As soon as Shi Tianfang, Xiao Dongtian, and the others got close, the light became clear and formed a huge array, isolating them from the outside world. The Celestial Gate Masters Yin and Yang Life and Death Array. Xiao Dongtian let out a sigh. The level of exquisiteness is indeed extraordinary. No wonder it could trap the nemesis of all formations, the supreme formation breaking drum, in West Hill City. In this world, I'm afraid only the supreme void yin-yang formation and the great immortal thousand phenomenon sword formation can be mentioned in the same breath among all the existing formations in the divine land. Shi Tianfang said lightly, the advantage of this formation is that it doesn't need to rely on the terrain, and it can move freely like the 9 luminaries sky-crumbling formation of the demon race. But, it also has a disadvantage, and that is, it must be controlled by an expert with top-notch magical power. The master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders is not here right now. Even if someone else were to control and activate this formation, its power would definitely be greatly reduced. It would not be able to stop us. Zhong Yu and the 6 paths will didn't move, but the Shura saber turned into a bloody ray and slashed at the yin-yang life and death array. The violent bloody ray seemed to want to slaughter all the living beings in the world. The death chi that pervaded the air darkened the sky. Although the target of the attack was Yujing Mountain and the yin-yang life and death array, below Yujing Mountain, with the mirror lake of the cloud peak as the center, all living beings within a radius of several thousand miles were contaminated by the death chi and the murderous aura, and died. Although the yin-yang life and death array shone brightly, the Shura saber still tore a gap in it. Shi Tianfang, Xiao Dongtian, and the others immediately entered the array through the gap and rushed toward Yujing Mountain. At this moment, in the All Heavens Palace at the top of Yujing Mountain, Xiao Yan sneered and looked at the scene. He said to Li Yuanfang beside him, "Do it." Li Yuanfang nodded and left the All Heavens Palace. He flew to the branch of the Mystic Heaven Treasure Tree in the distance, where another identical Li Yuanfang was sitting. However, this Li Yuanfang had the cultivation base of the late Golden Elixir. This was Li Yuanfang's real body. He, who was at the middle stage of the elixir realm, was just a doppelganger. At this moment, a spot of light shot out from between the eyebrows of his real body, connecting with the yin and yang life and death formation above Yujing Mountain. The incarnation took out a talisman and cast it out. An azure dragon shadow emerged in the air and let out a mighty dragon roar. Then, it coiled around Li Yuanfang's body. It was Zhu Yi's dragon ascending skill. It was a mysterious realm of constantly improving and forging ahead. It was compatible with Li Yuanfang's own magical sense and dharma power, constantly raising his cultivation base. There was a faint flash of thunder in the void, but it did not fall. A clear light flashed above Li Yuanfang's head, and a purple golden elixir emerged. The azure dragon shadow coiled around the golden elixir and turned into a tiny baby shadow. Its facial features were exactly the same as when Li Yuanfang was born. This was a talisman that Zhu Yi had specially refined before his closed-door training. It forcibly helped Li Yuanfang shape his virtual soul and temporarily raised his cultivation base from the late golden elixir to the early Yuanying realm. It was just a virtual soul. At this moment, Li Yuanfang's strength was definitely not as good as his own when he formed his nascent soul and advanced to the early Yuanying realm, but it was already stronger than the late golden elixir. As soon as the virtual soul appeared, Li Yuanfang immediately felt that his connection with the yin and yang life and death formation was even closer. This formation was the foundation for his first connection with Xianmen Tianzong. In the Arctic Ice Sea, Li Yuanfang saw the mysterious yin and yang life and death formation for the first time. When he was young, he was fascinated by it. Even if it was just a change of the formation pattern, he might not be able to understand it even if he tried his best to watch it from the outside. However, Li Yuanfang was still completely immersed in it. For him, the mysterious and extraordinary formation pattern talisman was the most wonderful scene in the world. After that, he became the disciple of Lin Feng. Finally, he could fulfill his wish and concentrate on studying this formation. Now, he had the opportunity to personally manipulate this powerful formation in the great Tianyuan world. But Li Yuanfang's eyes were still calm and peaceful. He was completely immersed in the changes of the formation, concentrating on it. Under his control, in the yin and yang life and death formation, countless talisman patterns suddenly operated. The crazy killing intent and death chi of the Azura katana were all transformed into the majestic chi of life. The momentum of the Azura katana, which was about to destroy everything, was suddenly stopped. Shi Tianfang's eyes slightly narrowed. The next moment, he found that under the operation of the endless chi of life, the gap created by the Azura katana had closed, and he and the others were also trapped in the formation. After the change of life and death, it was the change of yin and yang. In the formation, the pure yang real fire was burning, and the netherworld amethyst was flashing with a strange luster. The inside of the formation seemed to have become a black and white world. Pure yang qi and yin qi operated together, and like a huge millstone, it crushed towards Shi Tianfang and the others. Shaoyan's yin and yang heaven-burning formation was a variant of the yin and yang life and death formation, in which the explosive power of the firmament flaming lotus was added. The yin and yang heaven-burning formation was built by Shaoyan's own magic power. But the yin and yang life and death formation was a huge formation as vast as the sky. Li Yuanfang only needed to guide and control the whole operation. Shi Tianfang's expression remained unchanged. Slowly rotating 6 paths while beside him, the rotation speed suddenly increased. Pure white, crimson, pitch black, deep purple, and dark green lights, as well as a multicolored light, began to revolve in the air, expanding incessantly. It was like a real reincarnation of the universe, rotating together with thousands of creatures, pulling everything around to the center of the wheel. The huge power even made the yin and yang rotation of the yin and yang life and death formation unstable, and there was a tendency to lose control. Li Yuanfang remained calm and controlled the formation to change again. This time, he did not aim to hurt the enemy, but to trap the enemy firmly in the formation. At this time, the sound of running water suddenly came into the ears of Shi Tianfang, Xiao Dongtian, and the others. At first, it was almost inaudible, but after a moment, it sounded like a tsunami. Then, inside the yin and yang life and death formation, they saw a seemingly endless black ocean pouring into the formation, turning into a roaring black tide and rushing toward them. The seawater was endlessly cold, bone-chilling, as if it could swallow all light. It was the coldest yin, the purest yin, and the coldest. At the same time, it nurtured the 3 power essences of pure yin, extreme cold, and darkness, all of which had reached an extremely profound realm. Shi Tianfang and the others immediately recognized that it was the black seawater of the yin and yang sea at the foot of the jade capital mountain. In the tide, a giant black fish was riding the waves, bobbing up and down in the sea. It was even bigger than an ordinary whale, and it looked a bit like the Kuanpang when it transformed into the Kuan form. When it emerged from the water, it looked like an island. On the head of the black fish, a purple-clothed girl was sitting cross-legged. On her knees was a long black sword that looked like ice crystals. She had a beautiful appearance, and her long hair fluttered in the sea, making her look like a fairy of the sea. The girl looked calm, but her eyes were unusually quick-witted as she focused on the front. In the air above her, a strange pill floated. It was completely black, as transparent and resplendent as ice crystals, and emitted rolling purple light. Impressively, there was also a shadow of an azure dragon circling around it, which turned into an illusory shadow of a baby girl. When the baby girl opened and closed her eyes, a quiet black light flashed. It was Luo Qingguo, the youngest disciple of the Profound Gate's master, Lin Feng. The giant black fish was naturally Wu Tong. He was tumbling in the Yin and Yang Sea, causing the black tide to surge, which turned into a tsunami and pressed down on Shi Tianfang and the others. At the same time, Luo Qinggu pinched a sword art with her left hand and lightly pointed at the top of Wu Tong's head, letting Wu Tong receive her sword intent. Then, she held the Profound Che sword on her knees with her right hand and pulled the tip of the sword. All of a sudden, the raging black waves condensed into countless huge black ice swords. The tips of these swords were as big as small mountain peaks, emitting a piercingly cold sword qi, thrusting towards Shi Tianfang, Shao Dongtian, and the others. That black fish is a demon at the first level of the immortal demon soul realm? There's something strange about this black sea. He and that little girl can actually launch such a powerful attack together. Zhang Enrui, the sect master of the human realm, drank the wine in his cup in one gulp, and then threw his own cup at the thousands of black ice swords in front of him. The small mouth of the cup suddenly turned into a bottomless pit that could contain everything. It distorted the space and swallowed a large number of black ice swords that were as big as mountains. Zhang Enrui's hands didn't stop. He raised the wine cups in the leather pouch at his waist one after another. Just like the first cup, he swallowed the black ice swords. Although the yin and yang life and death formation was constantly changing and mysterious, Shi Tianfang, the 6 paths of reincarnation, Shao Dongtian, the Black Heaven Seal, and the other experts still kept moving forward. They didn't care about Wu Tong and Luo Qinggu, letting Zhang Enrui deal with them. Their target was very clear: Jade Capital Mountain and the White Jade Pillar. However, right at this moment, a terrifying sword intent suddenly appeared. Even Shi Tianfang and the other experts of the Dao fusing level felt their hearts palpitate, and a feeling of impending disaster arose in their hearts. In the next moment, the 10,000 zhang long, clear light was already right in front of them. Chapter 845. The endless clear light seemed to want to destroy the world. It swept over, leaving a mark in the void. The light danced in the air as if the world had been cut open. Blood flowed out of the wound and splashed everywhere. Facing such a brutal sword light, Shi Tianfang, 6 paths of reincarnation, Shao Dongtian, and the Black Heaven Seal had to retreat. However, Li Yuanfang put his palms together and activated the yin and yang life and death formation, turning the void upside down. The enormous twisting force caused the 4 of them to pause. Although they broke free in an instant, the speed of the vicious sword light skyrocketed. In an instant, it grew longer and landed on the mysterious Heaven Seal, almost cutting off a corner of it. The mysterious Heaven Seal's origin spirit fused with the body of the magic treasure. It was as vast as the heavens, and a suppressive power erupted in all directions, forcefully blocking this sword strike. However, the terrifying sword light that split the heavens and split the earth still left a deep scar on the mysterious Heaven Seal. What a brutal sword! A muffled groan came from the Black Heaven Seal as it fell back. From the yin and yang life and death formation, a girl with half black and half white hair walked out slowly with the heaven-crushing sword in her hand. She stared at Shi Tianfang and the others expressionlessly. It was Lin Feng's sword attendant, Xian Li. The Black Heaven Seal's original spirit appeared again and turned into a black-robed man. He stared at Xian Li and said, "Even the heavens are not as good as you. Before the 9 heavens are formed, I'm afraid only the immortal heaven sword of Shu Mountain can defeat you." It would have been better if he hadn't mentioned the immortal heaven sword. Once he did, Xian Li's emotionless eyes suddenly became cold and her aura became even more ferocious. Shi Tianfang and Shao Dongtian frowned. Why didn't the master of the Celestial Gate take this sword with her? Wait. I see. Shu Mountain's main target is her. The 2 stared at Xian Li and shook their heads subconsciously. This sword was too brutal and dangerous. It was almost impossible to refine and subdue it. At most, they could only destroy it. But even if they could do it, it was not worth it to fight such a brutal sword to the death. Perhaps in the world, only the Shu Mountain Sword sect would covet this sword, and they were the only ones who could use it to their advantage. Shi Tianfang and Xiao Dongtian didn't want to fight Xianli, but it wasn't up to them. The heaven-punishing sword in Xianli's hand suddenly emitted a bright light. This time, her target was Shi Tianfang. Shi Tianfang did not dare to be negligent. He clasped his palms together, and a huge shadow of light appeared above his head. Its head reached the sky, and its feet stepped on the ground. It looked otherworldly, noble and proud, as if it was an immortal overlooking all living beings. The Master of the Heavenly Law, Sakra Heaven. After Sakra's silhouette appeared, Shi Tianfang pushed both of his palms forward, and the silhouette of Sakra above his head also did the same action. An endless tide of light rushed towards Xianli, but it was no match for Xianli's sword, which directly annihilated the tide of light. Wherever the mournful clear light passed, Shi Tianfang's visualization of Sakra Heaven's light image was directly cut into two pieces at the waist. Shi Tianfang's expression remained unchanged. The light and shadow condensed once again, but this time, it was no longer the image of Sakra Heaven. Instead, it was a lofty god who seemed to be the creator of all living things. Brahma Avatar. Brahman and I are one. As Shi Tianfang chanted, the Brahma Avatar descended and merged with him, causing his aura to skyrocket, making him look like a god of creation. Slowly, he raised his right hand and pointed his finger at Xianli. The secret skill of the reincarnation sect, the Great Brahma Finger. With a single finger, all living things were born. The stone nodded, and the heaven and earth opened and closed. But after the creation, came the destruction, the end of all living things. At the same time, the 6 paths will also appeared on the other side. As it rotated, the face in the center of the wheel opened its mouth and spat out a small red lotus. This red lotus was formed by extremely pure and deep red flames. Slowly, each petal of the lotus emitted a clear radiance, presenting an illusory yet enchanting beauty that made people want to immerse their souls in it. It was the karmic fire of the red lotus. The karmic fire of the red lotus that was activated by the 6 paths will was even more mysterious and terrifying than the ordinary fire. It was a combination of the power of the 6 paths wheel and the karmic fire of the red lotus. It was extraordinarily domineering. Not only could it wear down the enemy's arcane energy, but it could also damage the enemy's soul and soul. Moreover, it could also trigger the strange karmic fire, causing the victim's soul to crumble and fall into the cycle of reincarnation. It was fine if the fire didn't touch the body, but once it did, even a Dao integration realm expert would have a headache. This sword's will of annihilation is even stronger than the Azura battle saber. The Azura battle saber only kills, but this sword wants to destroy the world. The face in the center of the 6 paths will stared at Xianli and said, "But this way, it will be even more difficult for you to escape from my karmic fire of the red lotus." Xianli was expressionless. She raised the heaven-crushing sword in her hand and pointed it at the top of her head. In the next moment, the sword slashed down. The clear light gathered in a single line, and when the light line slashed down, the void was split apart. Even the yin and yang life and death array formation trembled a little. It was like a painting that was suddenly cut in half. Then, the two halves intertwined, and a gap appeared in the painting. The karmic fire of the 6 paths will was directly cut in half. Then, the dreamy red lotus of the karmic fire of the 6 paths will instantly dimmed, as if a living being had been killed. The flame gradually extinguished, and finally, it disappeared. The clear light line of Xianli's sword drew a mysterious arc in the air and completed a beautiful turn. At last, the tip of the sword touched the tip of Shi Tianfang's great Brahma finger. Shi Tianfang's expression changed slightly. He retracted his finger and retreated, but the finger had already exploded. Countless rays of light swirled around it, and it looked like blood splattered everywhere. It was the finger that had been injured by Xianli's sword. The Xianli sword continued forward. Shi Tianfang's expression was extremely solemn. Arcane energy gushed out from his body and turned into 6 rays of light. Then, they condensed into a wheel that looked exactly like the Six Paths wheel above his head. It was just an illusory wheel of light. The wheel was also divided into 6 grids, and it rotated continuously, showing the 6 paths of reincarnation. Among them, the white grid that represented the celestial path, the green grid that represented the hungry ghost path, the purple grid that represented the animal path, and the colorful grid that represented the human path had very clear light and shadow engravings on these 4 grids. As for the blood-red grid that represented the Azura path and the black grid that represented the hell path, the engravings that appeared on them were relatively blurry. The celestial path of reincarnation of the reincarnation sect cultivated the supreme secret art of the reincarnation Taoist, the 6 paths of reincarnation book, and it was the only branch of the 6 paths of reincarnation that could cultivate the 6 paths of reincarnation Tao fruit. However, the 6 paths of reincarnation Tao differed from person to person, and the Tao fruit that could be cultivated was mostly biased. Throughout the ages, only the founder of the sect, the reincarnation Taoist, was able to cultivate the 6 paths of reincarnation Tao fruit. Shi Tianfang's 6 paths of reincarnation Tao fruit wheel rotated, and time and space twisted together, trying to drag everything around it into the samsara. The 6 paths of reincarnation Tao wheel, a peak Mahayana realm magic treasure, rotated opposite to him, and also twisted time and space. One man and one treasure established a mysterious connection, and together, they enhanced each other's arcane energy. Together, they created a distorted world that even affected the surrounding people, who could not stand steadily and were almost dragged into it. The 2 6 paths of reincarnation revolved at the same time, and the powerful twisting force caused Xian Li's sword light to tremble slightly. Xian Li's eyes gradually turned blood-red, and the tip of the heaven-punishing sword also flashed with a fierce blood-red light. Then, a clear light surged out, and at the end of the clear light, the blood-red light became more and more dazzling, while the clear light gradually faded away. In the end, there was only a fierce blood-red sword light with a monstrous murderous aura. Shi Tianfang and the human face in the middle of the 6 wheels wore a gloomy expression. Neither of them said a word, but they circulated their energy to the extreme. The 2 6 paths of reincarnation resonated with each other and turned into a huge black hole, twisting and distorting the yin and yang life and death array. With this great force, Shi Tianfang and the 6 paths of reincarnation finally stopped the fierce heaven-punishing sword light, but the blood-red sword light was still moving forward slowly. So strong! The human face in the center of the 6 paths of reincarnation said, below the creation level, this sword's offensive power can be said to be the strongest. Perhaps only those semi-finished creation level treasures that are just one step away from the creation level can barely compete with it. As Xianli fought against Shi Tianfang and the 6 paths of reincarnation, Xianmen Tianzong and the others also entered the battlefield and fought against the invading enemies. Wu Tong and Luo Qinggu controlled the Yin-Yang Sea to fight against the reincarnation sect's human path master, Zhang Enrui. Xiao Zhen, Er's uncle, Gu Peng, fought against the reincarnation sect's hungry ghost path master, Taoist heavenly ghost. Buddhist monk Dade fought against a human path's returning void-level expert, and the 2 poles Sky Peak also gave up on resting and fought against Tao Venerate Dongming. Xiao Yan also entered the yin and yang life and death array, and he unleashed his Yuanshan incarnation, turning it into a fiery Tai Chi diagram to fight against Xiao Dongtian and the Xian Tian seal. Xiao Zhen, Jiayu, and the others also entered the array, and with the power of the array, they fought against some of the Yuanshan incarnations in the enemy's camp. Li Yuanfang controlled the yin and yang life and death array to support the others. He did not have the ability to trap so many Dao-fusing experts and Mahayana-level artifacts, but when they were attacked by Xiao Yan, Xianli, and the others, the array would suddenly activate, and they would be at a disadvantage. At the same time, he controlled the yin and yang life and death array to restrain the terrifying Azura saber. Fighting in the yin and yang life and death array, Xiao Yan, Xianli, and the others had the home ground advantage. Under such circumstances, Xiao Yan could barely fight against 2 enemies, and at the same time, restrain Xiao Dongtian and the slightly damaged Xian Tian seal. On his side, he was on the defensive, trying to stall for time. On the other side, Xianmen Tianzong attacked fiercely. Zhang Enrui, the human path's leader, was facing the yin and yang sea controlled by Wu Tong and Luo Qingguo, and was constantly being disturbed by the yin and yang life and death array. Xiao Zhen's magical power was outstanding, and she had many artifacts in her hands, causing her Yuanshan opponent to be in a difficult situation. With the help of Jiayu, White Light, North Sea Whale King, and the others, they also managed to stabilize their position. Other than Xiao Dongtian and Xian Tianxil, who had the upper hand, Xianmen Tianzong had a slight advantage in the other battles. With the help of the array, Xianli was fighting against two enemies, and the more she fought, the more advantageous she became. Shi Tianfang looked around and frowned. This array is troublesome. With a thought, the Azura Saber's primordial spirit battle Azura roared and held the Azura Saber with both hands. With a slash, the crazy power annihilated the boundless life force, turning it into a bloody death aura. Its power returned to its peak, and the battle Azura's blood-red eyes flashed coldly. Death aura stone? Annihilating death aura. So one of the treasures of this array is the death aura stone produced by the Azura realm. Since that's the case, how are you going to trap me? The battle Azura roared into the sky, and the violent killing intent and death aura filled the entire yin and yang life and death array. Li Yuanfang, who was driving the array, immediately felt something wrong. The death aura stone in the array was moving, and it shook violently, wanting to leave the yin and yang life and death array and go into the arms of the battle Azura. Chapter 846. Sensing the changes in the yin and yang life and death array, Li Yuanfang's expression was calm. As expected, the worst-case scenario, in theory, if Battle Azura snatched away the Death Chi stone, it would at most prevent the yin and yang life and death array from working. The 6 transformations of life and death array would be reduced to 5 transformations. Its power would be greatly weakened, but it would still be of great use. But in fact, at this moment, except for the Shura Saber, all the enemies in the formation were fighting against the yin and yang life and death formation. The yin and yang life and death formation suppressed them, but the two sides also fell into a strange balance. Once the yin and yang life and death array changed and its powers suddenly weakened, it could collapse like an ant's nest. After all, there were 3 Dao integration powerhouses, 3 Mahayana grade treasures, 3 return to void stage powerhouses, and several nascent soul incarnation stage powerhouses trapped in the formation. Li Yuanfang took a deep breath. Both of his hands kept changing the incantation gestures, manipulating the yin and yang life and death formation to launch the life and death transformation to the extreme. Many other transformations took turns, supplying all the power to the life and death transformation, firmly suppressing the death chi stone and preventing it from moving. At the same time, this also completely suppressed the Azura Saber in the yin and yang life and death array, causing the two sides to fall into a stalemate. But this way, the array's suppression on Shi Tianfang and the others weakened, and they could only barely maintain it. Zhang Enrui and the others began to gradually turn the tables. Only Xianli against Shi Tianfang and 6 Paths of Reincarnation, and Gu Peng against Taoist Sky Ghosts still had the upper hand. Among the remaining people, the Polar Sky Peak and Zen Master Dade were seriously injured. They could only maintain a stalemate against opponents who were originally weaker than them. Xiao Zhen was besieged by 2 first-tier primordial soul cultivators. But the one who is in the most danger out of everyone is still Xiao Yan. Earlier he had a bloody battle with Jia Luoshi and his injuries have not healed. Now he has to face the encirclement of Xiao Dongtian and the mysterious Sky Seal alone. His situation is already very dangerous. If not for Xiao Dongtian and Xian Tianing worrying about him risking his life and wanting to take him down at the lowest cost, his situation would be even more dangerous. The fact that Xiao Yan had suddenly stepped into the nascent divinity realm and displayed a formidable fighting prowess had truly exceeded the expectations of Shi Tianfang, Xiao Dongtian, and the others. Xiao Dongtian and the others couldn't help but be wary of Zhu Yi, who hadn't shown up yet. In addition, Xianli wasn't completely ignoring the overall situation. She would help from time to time, which allowed Xiao Yan to barely hold on. However, if the situation continued like this, he would definitely be killed by Xiao Dongtian and the Xian Tianyin before Xianli could completely destroy Shi Tianfang and the Six Paths Wheel. On Yujing Mountain, Li Yuanfang's expression was as calm as ever, but his forehead was slightly sweaty. He looked up at the top of the mysterious heaven treasure tree, in the direction of the mysterious heaven timeless cave. I can't get in touch with Tianhao. If third senior brother and the others don't return in time, I'm afraid second senior brother's efforts will be in vain. A great battle unfolded on Mount Yujing. At this moment, in the Spirit Sea, at the border between the Spirit Sea world and the Sea of Light, a huge ball of light existed on the boundary between the two, flashing with a faint light. The light was constantly changing, sometimes black, sometimes white. Lin Feng's original body and Brontosaurus's doppelganger were standing opposite each other in the ball of light. They were studying the Tao together and deducing the third chapter of the Tao Te Ching, the Yin and Yang chapter. Silently, his god of war doppelganger sat cross-legged outside the ball of light like Tao Master Liubo. Silently, he sensed the mysteries of the great Tao in the Spirit Sea. The god of war doppelganger suddenly opened his eyes and looked into the distance of the illusory world of the Spirit Sea. The seemingly endless tide of the Spirit Sea once again surged toward the Sea of Light. This time, the tide was much more turbulent than before. In the vast tide of spiritual qi, one could see invisible light ribbons condensed from the great Tao laws. It was as if the great Tao was pressing down on the Sea of Light. Before the tide reached them, Lin Feng's god of war doppelganger's heart skipped a beat. With a wave of his hand, the stone ladder and the stone flute fell into the air. The stone flute and the stone ladder had completely lost their luster and looked like two ordinary stone sculptures. The concept of power and spiritual energy within dissipated the instant the great tide erupted. It must have been caused by the actions of the Taishu Temple's side. Lin Feng frowned slightly. Compared to before, the tide is much stronger. As expected, there are really capable people in Taishu Temple. They turned disaster into opportunity. They actually want to take advantage of the opportunity to repair the gap in the Spirit Sea left by Yuhuang Heavenly Sea to further enhance their understanding and control of the Spirit Sea. If they succeed in repairing the gap, will they be able to completely control the Spirit Sea? This is really the worst-case scenario that we all expected. The tide still came for the Sea of Light and did not affect Lin Feng and Tao Master Liubo at all. Lin Feng looked at the invisible light ribbons crisscrossing in the tide of spiritual qi and gradually narrowed his eyes. No matter how hard I try, I can only be the second best. The best result is always being the second best. This is not what I want to see. At this moment, in another area of the vast Spirit Sea world, in a place that seemed to be very close to Lin Feng and the Ocean of Light, yet also seemed to be very far away, several people were also sitting cross-legged, forming two circles at the same time. In the middle circle, there were only two people sitting. One had a kind face with his eyes closed, and the other had snow-white hair and a dignified expression. They were Tai Dao Master and Shoichi Dashin. They sat face to face, and between them, a talisman floated in the air. Countless invisible light ribbons extended from the talisman, as if connecting the entire Spirit Sea. Next to Tai Dao Master and Shoichi Dashin, Yun Yuanjin stood beside them. He flicked his hands and Dharma power flew out one after another, turning into waves of light that revolved around Tai Dao Master, Shoichi Dashin, and the talisman. In the outer circle, Xianlin Taoist, Kai Fengzhou, Yu Yuan Dao Master, and Lin Dao Han sat cross-legged in four directions. At this moment, a talisman floated above each of their heads, and endless brilliance emerged from the talisman. Behind the four of them, these streams of light projected four balls of light and shadow illusions. At this moment, a man and a woman stood in the large light and shadow illusion behind Yu Yuan Dao Master. The man had an extremely handsome appearance, a tranquil expression, and a lofty bearing. He was like the moon that hung alone in the horizon, chilly and lonely, and the pattern between his brows that was like a full moon was ceaselessly changing, and it displayed the changes of the moon's brilliance. The woman's eyebrows were picturesque, and her facial features were ethereal and beautiful. She held a round mirror in her arms as she followed behind the man. It was the light and shadow image of Yuehua Tian and Li Jingyuan. And in the light and shadow illusion behind Lin Daohan, there was a man in ancient clothes with a calm expression. It was as if he had a card up his sleeve and everything was under his control. This man's eyebrows were 40 to 50% similar to the current temple master of Taishu Temple, Yan Nanlai. He was the second temple master in the history of Taishu Temple, Yan Xinghe, one of the 4 heroes of ancient Taishu, and the ancestor of Yan Nanlai. In the light and shadow illusion behind Xianlin Taoist, the image of a middle-aged man also appeared. His aura was powerful and majestic, and he seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life, but he was also unusually intelligent. The most eye-catching part of this middle-aged man was his eyes. They were a pair of double pupils. His eyes were like the sun and the moon, looking at the vicissitudes of life. Countless rays of divine light shot out from them, displaying the incomparably gorgeous scene between heaven and earth. One of the 4 heroes of ancient Taishu, Huang Chen, had been studying under Taishu Taoists since the primeval age. In the Great War at the end of the primeval age, he had killed the leaders of the Fire Dragon, Jade Dragon, and White Jade Dragon clans of the primeval Heavenly Dragon clan, as well as the leader of the Yingzhao clan, primeval Yingzhao. He had made great contributions to the rise of the human clan, and he was also one of the creators of the legend of double pupils. But among the 4 light and shadow illusions, the most eye-catching one was the ball of light behind Kai Fengzhou, which was larger than the other 3 light and shadow illusions. This was not because Kai Fengzhou was more powerful, but because the talisman he had activated was more powerful. In that light and shadow illusion, a tall young man stood. His hair was disheveled, and he looked very messy. Unlike Yu Huaishan, Yan Xinghe, and Huang Chen, who were all dressed in the traditional white robes of Taishu Temple with patterns of white clouds embroidered on their lapels, this young man was dressed in a brown linen robe, and he looked very shabby. But such a man exuded an aura that was even stronger than that of Yu Huaishan and the other 2. An unruly and domineering smile appeared on his face, and his temperament was completely different from that of the other 3. He seemed very arrogant, as if he did not care about anything in the world, and he was lawless. And this person was the head of the 4 heroes of the Great Void in ancient times, the strongest cultivator after the founder of Taishu Temple, the Taishu Taoist. His name was Wen Qiyang. It was said that Wen Qiyang's magical powers were so strong that they were on par with his master. When the emperor was still on the throne, Wen Qiyang went to the desolate ancient sea of stars and gambled with him. Both rounds were draws, and the emperor abdicated, and he became a Buddha on the spot. After he founded the Tempest Temple, Wen Qiyang went to the Tempest Temple again and had another 2 gambles, and the result was 1 loss and 1 win. After the Taishu Taoist and the Buddha went to the Dead Sea together, Wen Qiyang was recognized as the strongest cultivator of the human clan at that time, and he was even stronger than the human emperor of the same era. In a war between the 2 realms, this super fierce person had once single-handedly injured the Saint Emperor of the Demon Clan at that time. At this moment, Xianlin Taoist, Kai Fengzhou, Lord Yu Yuan, and Lin Daohan were sitting cross-legged in silence. The light and shadow behind them projected a majestic radiance, which landed on the talisman between Lord Tai and Shoichi Dashin. Lord Yu Yuan said coldly, Tian Hai Yuda probably did not expect that the seeds of disaster he planted in the past would instead help our Taishu Temple have the opportunity to completely control the Spirit Sea. Different from the Ying Sea, the Mysterious Sea, the Netherworld Sea, and the other seas, the Spirit Sea is mysterious and unfathomable. It is interdependent with the vast 1,000 worlds and is everywhere. After we completely control the Spirit Sea, as long as we can determine the target's specific location, we can use the power of the Spirit Sea to suppress any place in the vast 1,000 worlds at any time. Yun Yuanjin, who was standing, smiled. If others obtain the Spirit Sea, they won't be able to determine the target's location, and they will even avoid it. However, our Taishu Temple has the Haotian Mirror. Unless we hide in the turbulence of the void, we will be found by the Haotian Mirror. At that time, the Haotian Mirror and the Spirit Sea will act together. Even if Tian Hai Yuda revives, he will be suppressed to death. Chapter 847. Kai Fengzhou sat under the illusion created by Wen Qiang's light and shadow. His hand changed signs, and he sent his magic power into the talisman above his head. Silently, he said, the master of the Taoist sect should also be sealed here. We need to guard against him interfering. Xianlin Taoist shook his head. He can't find us here. If he really is related to the Yudu beast, then he might be able to find the place where the Yudu of the heavenly seas caused the destruction. There, even if he knows what happened, he won't be able to stop it. Lord Tai closed his eyes, his expression gentle. The rise of such a strong practitioner is the blessing of the human race. There is no need to make things difficult for him. After we are done here, we can just shake him out of the spirit sea. Opposite him, Shoichi Dashin said indifferently, but it is not the blessing of our Taishu temple. His Yujing mountain can freely hide in the turbulence of the void. Like the king of the underworld's realm of the underworld, it is a rare place that does not fear the search of the Haotian mirror. Unlike the king of the underworld's realm, which is fixed, his Yujing mountain can move freely. Slowly, Xianlin Taoist said, then after we completely control the spirit sea, we can keep him there for a while. Our temple doesn't want anything else. First, we will take his Yujing mountain, and then we will send him out. Shoichi Dashin shook his head. Never mind, let him be. As long as we can completely control the spirit sea, it will be fine if he doesn't cause trouble. Even if he does, he won't be able to overturn the heavens. He can only keep hiding in the void. Once he shows himself in the boundless world, he will quickly be found by the Haotian mirror. The problem with the demon race has been solved. We can free up our hands and gather 12 people. With the help of the Haotian mirror and the void yin yang bell, we can work together to search the void. Although it will take time and effort, we will eventually find him. Xianlin Dao Master nodded and didn't say anything more. He simply said, disciple has observed him. He is not a person who is content with a plain life. His heart of a tiger and wolf surpasses Liang Pan, Xian Longsheng, Shiyu, and the others. While Dao Master Zhengyi and Dao Master Xianlin were talking, Taiwan Dao Master's expression did not change. Yun Yuanjin, Kai Fengzhou, Dao Master Yu Yuan, and Lin Daohan also did not change their expressions. They just listened quietly. When Shoichi Dashin and Xianlin Taoist finished their conversation, Lord Tai said, the first priority is to resolve the threat of the demon race. If we can completely control the spirit sea and wait for the Haotian mirror to recover, the human will have a huge advantage over the demon race. Even though the master of Xian Gate won't be able to find us, if he really goes to the place where Heavenly Sea Yuta destroyed back then, it's hard to predict what will happen. After all, we're still a distance away from completely controlling the spirit sea. If something suddenly happens there, I'm afraid we won't be able to react in time. Our speed needs to be faster. When Dao Master Righteous One and the others heard this, they all nodded and immediately activated their spiritual power. The light on the core talisman became more and more dazzling, and the invisible light ribbons connected to the spiritual sea world also became more and more bright. Yun Yuanjin flicked out several magic power and circled around the core talisman. He looked at Xianlin Taoist and said, Senior brother Xianlin, if we talk about restlessness, you don't seem to be worse than the master of Xian Gate. Shoichi Dashin was beside him, but Yun Yuanjin didn't have any taboo. He talked and laughed, and Shoichi Dashin didn't mind. Xianlin Taoist said silently, the goal is the same. Everyone has to fight for it. Naturally, they have to plot against each other. He looked at Yun Yuanjin and said, Junior sister Yun, aren't you guys the same? His words vaguely included Dao Master Qing Yi, but Xianlin Taoist's tone was calm. Yun Yuanjin didn't care either and just smiled. At this moment, Lin Feng, who was far away at the border between the world of the spirit sea and the sea of light, watched the vast spiritual chi tide sweep and fill the sea of light under the influence of the invisible light bands condensed by thousands of great daos. The sea of light silently devoured the second spiritual chi tide, allowing it to flow into itself. But this time, it was different. The countless invisible light bands in the spiritual chi tide also filled the sea of light. This time, the Sea of Light was being filled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Lin Feng and the Brontosaurus clone didn't move, while the God of War clone came to the edge of the Sea of Light and looked at what was happening in front of him expressionlessly. To him, this was definitely not something to be happy about. Among the 7 seas of heavenly origin, the Spirit Sea and the Dead Sea were the most mysterious but also the most special. Unlike the Nether Sea, the Sea of Wonders, the Profound Sea, and the Star Sea, they seemed to be everywhere and closely connected to the Great Thousand Worlds. Those who controlled Yingzhou, Penglai, and Fangzhang Mountains could completely control the Ying Ocean and turn it into their backyard. Anyone who dared to enter would be suppressed by the entire Ying Ocean. However, that was only possible in the Ying Ocean, unlike the spiritual ocean, which could be attacked at any point in the colossal world as long as the target was determined. Even if Lin Feng obtained all 3 mountains and completely controlled the Ying Ocean, or the dragon race that completely controlled the mysterious ocean, they would still be in danger. The power of the spiritual ocean was above the Ying Ocean and mysterious ocean. If they really locked onto a target, they could forcefully tear apart the power restriction of the Ying Ocean and mysterious ocean and suppress them. The situation was similar to the Dead Ocean and Empty Ocean. The Dead Ocean was more mysterious than the spiritual ocean, but it could not be mentioned first. The Empty Ocean was the void battlefield. Due to the chaotic laws of the void, it was basically impossible for anyone to completely control it. Under such circumstances, the spiritual ocean could definitely be considered a strategic killing weapon, especially in the hands of the Taishu Temple that possessed the Haotian mirror. The threat would increase exponentially. Lin Feng had limited knowledge of the specific functions of the Haotian mirror. However, from the fact that it had monitored Tianhuang mainland for countless years and many great demons were wary of it, it was very likely that the Haotian mirror had a certain degree of spatial detection and locking ability. Many great demons with high cultivation levels in Tianhuang mainland were in a dormant state and did not show themselves easily most of the time. This was more or less because of this consideration. People like the Enchantress and the Golden Rock Sage were the minority after all. On one hand, they had some hidden means, and on the other hand, they were bold. If I'm not wrong, the Haotian Mirror's guidance and the Spiritual Ocean's attack are a perfect match. This is not including the Haotian Mirror's own attack. Lin Feng shook his head. When that time comes, no one in the entire Divine Land would dare to provoke the Taishu Temple. Even I can only control the Yujing Mountain and hide in the void. Otherwise, as long as I show my face in the vast 1,000 domains, I will be targeted if I'm not careful. Once I'm targeted, the attack will arrive instantly. It will be faster than anyone else, because the attack will come from right beside me. Unless I hide in the void turbulence and cultivate all the way until I'm not afraid of the spiritual ocean and the Haotian mirror. Well, to be precise, I have to add in the many experts of the Taishu Temple. But let's not talk about how to cultivate to that stage. There might not be enough time. Not to mention that we are both cultivating. Everyone is improving. Lin Feng sighed and closed his eyes slightly. When he opened them again, they shone brightly as he stared at the sea of light in front of him. This situation is intolerable. But what should I do? At this moment, the invisible ribbons of light that seemed to be broken and twisted in the sea of light were being repaired. Lin Feng's eyes flashed. Suddenly, he discovered that an illusion had appeared in the sea of light again. It was misty and seemed to be a void passage leading to the outside world, but it was blocked by some mysterious power. Lin Feng looked carefully, and his pupils involuntarily shrank. In the illusion, thick black fog filled the air, as if there was only darkness in the world. But in the depths of the darkness, he could vaguely see a large amount of silver-white light and intermittent purple light flashing. The profound and domineering power concept in it gave Lin Feng a vague sense of familiarity. He focused his eyes and looked carefully. In the depths of the black fog, there was an incomparably huge city. That city was completely black, but it flickered with silver light. The strong contrast was extremely dazzling. This city was layered on top of one another, and it was boundlessly vast. It was as if an incomparably huge mountain range had been hollowed out from the middle to build such a city. Majestic silver-white light rushed into the sky from the city, breaking through the black fog and into the void. There were many figures of the demon race walking in the city. They all had triangular heads and human-like faces, but their backs were covered with long silver-white hair. A huge tail dragged behind them, and the surface of their skin was covered in purple runes. The demons in the city were all Yudu beasts like Yuhuang's celestial sea and grand immortal realm. This was where the Yudu race lived. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes. Ever since the war between the two worlds 4,000 years ago, when Yuhuang's celestial sea fell and the demon race retreated, the Yudu race had mysteriously disappeared. All of their clansmen had secretly vanished from the boundless worlds. From then on, no one could find the whereabouts of the Yudu race. Even the entire heavenly Tao demon scriptures were lost. For thousands of years, countless people and demons had tried to find the whereabouts of the Yudu race. Under the situation where Taishu Temple couldn't spare any manpower to search, no one had found the whereabouts of the missing Yudu race. Grand Immortal Realm was the first Yudu beast to reappear in the boundless worlds in the past 4,000 years. Of course, to be more precise, it was a Yudu beast without a corporeal body. From the looks of it now, the Yudu race hadn't been wiped out. Instead, they had gone into hiding. Lin Feng observed carefully and realized that there were many Yudu beasts in the city. Some of them had lower cultivation, but there were also many extremely terrifying great demons. However, all of the nether capital beasts had a common characteristic, and that was the 3 horns on their heads were covered with a small white halo. Everyone had 3, without exception. Sensing carefully, one would realize that the concept contained in the white halos was actually somewhat similar to the aura of the spirit sea world. But now, Lin Feng could clearly see that the white halos on the long horns of the Yudu beasts were gradually dissipating. The Yudu beasts clearly noticed this as well. After a short moment of confusion, they all let out roars of delight. In an instant, demon qi rushed into the sky in the city, and the roars shook the sky, causing the entire world of the black fog to tremble. Chapter 848. Looking at this scene, how could Lin Feng not understand what had happened back then? Yuhuang's celestial sea had swallowed a corner of the spirit sea, and because of the wonders of the spirit sea and the strangeness of the Yudu race's bloodline, other Yudu beasts had benefited from it. However, there was no free lunch in the world. The Yudu race had benefited from the spirit sea, but they also faced danger, which was being targeted by the spirit sea. The white halos on the horns on their heads were the restraints of the spirit sea's great Tao. If they hadn't been hiding in this strange dimensional world, they could have been suppressed and attacked by the spirit sea at any time. Back then, Yuhuang's celestial sea's divine arts and magic power had reached the heavens, and he had used all kinds of methods to conceal the hostility of the spirit sea. However, after his death, no one in the Yudu race had such divine arts and cultivation, so the Yudu race was exposed to the eyes of the spirit sea again. Without the spirit sea's consciousness, the suppression power wouldn't be too strong, but it wasn't something most Yudu people with lower cultivation could withstand. Those with higher cultivation had to face the suppression of the spirit sea while fighting other strong practitioners of the human race or the demon race. Fighting while shackled was undoubtedly a very dangerous thing. Looking at it now, maybe it was Yuhuang's will, or maybe it was the collective decision of the Yudu race, but after Yuhuang's death, the Yudu race retreated into this dimensional world that was covered in black fog, biding their time and waiting for a chance to rise again. Now, the time had come. The Taishu Temple repaired the spirit sea again, clearing away the traces left by Yuhuang, and also removing the shackles on the Yudu race. The unparalleled demon race that had once ruled over Heaven Wasteland thousands of years ago was about to see the light of day again. Even if Yuhuang's celestial sea had fallen, the Yudu race that no longer had to worry about the spirit sea was still one of the strongest races in Heaven Wasteland. Over these years, the Yudu race hadn't wasted their time. There were auras of many strong practitioners in the city, and the power of the entire Yudu race was extremely impressive. However, they might not know what regaining their freedom meant, or what they would face in the future. Many thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind as he stared at the scene before him. Others might not know, but Yu Huang Tianhai definitely knows. After his death, his clansmen will be targeted by the Spirit Sea. If I want to dispel the suppression of the Spirit Sea, I have to repair the gap in the Spirit Sea. Did he expect that his actions would allow the Taishu Temple to gain full control of its Spirit Sea during the process of repairing it? At the very least, he knows that if someone manages to repair their Spirit Sea, even if they can't completely control it, they'll at least have a huge advantage. Lin Feng stared at the dimensional realm in front of him that was filled with black fog. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. So, Yu Huang Heaven Sea will definitely leave behind some cards to fight for a chance for their people. Otherwise, we can only pin all our hopes on him never dying. If he doesn't die, he can help our clansmen hide from the suppression of the spiritual sea. But how can we be sure about this? Lin Feng's battle god clone looked at the light ball beside him, which was half in the world of the Spirit Sea and half in the Sea of Light. There, other than Lin Feng's main body and Brontosaurus's clone, the heavenly scarlet golden bead was also there. Yu Huang Tianhai bit off a corner of the Spirit Sea. With such a deep hatred, even if the Spirit Sea doesn't have its own consciousness, it'll probably remember him. If he dares to enter the Spirit Sea again, it'll immediately trigger the full suppression of the Spirit Sea. Even if he can withstand it, he won't be able to gain control of the Spirit Sea. Even if the crack in the Spirit Sea isn't repaired, it'll be the same for the other Yudu beasts wrapped in white halos. Lin Feng thought to himself, and this should be the backup plan he left behind. Using a secret art to help a race get rid of their physical body and demonic energy, and even their demonic soul is specially processed so that their spirit imprint and memories are no longer retained, thus freeing themselves from the restraints of the white halos formed by the power of the Spirit Sea. This secret art must have come with a hefty price. Even if all the resources are used up, it'll probably only be able to create a Grand Luo. Moreover, they'll need to reincarnate again and again to completely free themselves from the surveillance of the Spirit Sea. Even after the fall of Yu Huang Tianhai, it still hasn't been completed. If I came to this world 1 or 2,000 years earlier and picked up the heavenly scarlet golden bead and the Grand Luo, I'll probably have to wait for a few more reincarnations. Lin Feng's battle god clone walked into the light ball and arrived before the heavenly scarlet golden bead. Silently, he stared at the massive bead. Due to the scar left behind by Yu Huang Tianhai, the heavenly scarlet golden bead will not fuse with the spirit of the Grand Luo, barring some very rare and unpredictable circumstances. This sealed Spirit Sea can't be opened either. Only when the heavenly scarlet golden bead fuses with the spirit of the Grand Luo will there be hope of reopening this place, allowing the Grand Luo to enter. Now that I think about it, my previous speculation was a little off. The golden seal and the stone talisman were most likely left behind by Yu Huang Tianhai to aid him in heading to the Spirit Sea. Unfortunately, things are unpredictable, and Yu Huang Tianhai isn't flawless. Who would have thought that the golden seal and the stone talisman would be obtained by Dao Lord Liubo unintentionally? If I hadn't obtained the stone flute and the stone staircase from Taishu Temple, the Grand Luo and I would have been helpless before. Lin Feng frowned slightly. I feel like there's something wrong with this. A Grand Luo doesn't fear death, as long as he reincarnates one life after another. His spirit has been specially processed, so he doesn't fear being refined by others. At the same time, he will only awaken when he encounters the heavenly scarlet golden bead. But there's a key point here. The golden seal and the stone talisman were originally guarding the Grand Luo, and they were accidentally lost. Did Yu Huang Tianhai really not think of this? Did they not leave any safety measures behind? Let's not talk about this first. How could they guarantee that the heavenly scarlet golden bead would fall into the hands of a Grand Luo, and at the same time, that Grand Luo wouldn't be controlled by others, such as me? Lin Feng's expression was calm, but his eyes flickered slightly. Tianhai must have left other safety measures behind, but it seems like there's something wrong with these safety measures due to Tianhai's death. Silently, the Grand Luo was currently studying the essence of the Taoist techniques of the demon race left behind by Yu Huang Tianhai. Lin Feng did not disturb him, and tapped the heavenly scarlet golden bead with his finger. After carefully analyzing for a moment, Lin Feng also carefully examined the raging spirit sea tide outside. After a while, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, as bright and warm as the sun. Lin Feng's hands changed hand seals, and he tapped the heavenly scarlet golden bead with his finger again. A purple radiance surged out of the bead, leaving the light sphere and entering the sea of light, directly penetrating the illusion. Then, under the guidance of the purple radiance, the spirit sea tides of the great Tao of spirit qi that were continuously filling up the sea of light transformed into surging white light. It seemed to pass through the boundary and surge towards the dimensional world. Even though Lin Feng and the rest were sealed in the spirit sea, he could borrow the gap created by the celestial sea and the demon power of Yudu race that came from the same source to guide the spirit power of the spirit sea to that dimensional world. When the surging white light landed in the dimensional world, it did not show its form, nor did it need to pass through the thick black fog. It directly acted on the 3 long horns on the heads of the Yudu beasts. In an instant, the white halo on the horns of all the Yudu people that was gradually fading became dazzling once more. At the start, when they saw the white halo becoming brighter again, the Yudu people didn't panic. Some of the great demons even revealed expressions of anticipation, but soon, they realized that something was wrong. The heaven-shaking roars suddenly quietened down, and there was a moment when the Yudu imperial city fell into a deathly silence. The next moment, even more berserk roars resounded through the clouds and shook the black fog outside the Yudu imperial city. The great demons of Yudu were furious, and the entire dimensional world seemed like it was about to be destroyed. Lin Feng saw the situation and smiled slightly. He tapped the heavenly scarlet golden bead again, and another beam of purple light landed in the sea of light. As it spiraled, it was guided into the dimensional world through the power of the spirit sea. The Yudu people felt the purple light, and after a moment of silence, a huge amount of demon qi rushed into the sky. A few of the strongest Yudu beasts flew into the sky above the imperial city and stood upright in the sky. Purple light markings surged all over their bodies. That profound yet violent demon power made even Lin Feng frown slightly. Looking at so many great Yudu demons with outstanding abilities, his eyelids twitched. Back then, during the war between the 2 worlds, along with the Yuhuang Celestial Sea, the Yudu race lost quite a number of experts. Now that they still have such robust abilities, it's no wonder they could stir up such a huge wave back then. However, the stronger you guys are, the smoother the execution of my plan will be. Lin Feng chuckled and looked at the berserk power of the Yudu beasts pouring into the white ring of light on the horn on his head. He saw that many purple stripes had appeared on the white ring of light and they were still spreading. In the sea of light in front of Lin Feng's eyes, some purple light that looked like faint clouds started to appear. It infected the sea of light, but it didn't stop the spirit sea from mending the gap. Instead, it stirred up the great Tao in the spirit sea, trying to seize control of the spirit sea. The heavenly scarlet golden bead in front of Lin Feng trembled continuously and gave off beams of purple light. They fused into the sea of light and the tide of the spirit sea at the same time as though they were hubs. If Taishu Temple hadn't started mending the spirit sea, the Yudu people wouldn't have been able to break free from the white halos on their horns and could only endure it obediently. Now, they can take the chance to seize control of the spirit sea through the power of the spirit sea. Now that I look at it, this is the true arrangement of Yuhuang Celestial Sea, right? However, in his plan, Grand Luo would mend the spirit sea and free the other Yudu people from their restraints. Then, these people would help Grand Luo and completely seize control of the spirit sea. Of course, if he was still alive, he would definitely do it himself and use the damage he had caused to mend it to gain control of the spirit sea. What should this be called? A thief calling a thief, or a soldier calling a bandit? Lin Feng looked at this scene and smiled. Very good. I hereby announce that the tug-of-war competition officially begins. Announce the competitors from both sides. On the left, the competitors from Taishu Temple, and on the right, the competitors from Yudu race. The current leaders of Yudu race, a bunch of great demons of Yudu, clearly knew the plan of the late chief. After sensing the power of the Spirit Sea in detail, it was easy to see that there were people from other families trying to mend the Spirit Sea. The setup of Yu Huang's Celestial Sea was also showing its effect. Both sides were now in the process of wrestling. This opponent was most likely Taishu Temple. As for the specific situation in the Spirit Sea, the great demons of Yuda didn't know much, but they knew that no matter if it was fighting for control of the Spirit Sea or getting rid of the white halo formed by the power of the Spirit Sea, they needed to use all their strength. Because they weren't in the Spirit Sea, the Yuda people still suffered quite a bit. Even so, the restoration of the Sea of Light by Taishu Temple instantly went haywire. The damage to the Spirit Sea was still being repaired, but everyone in Taishu Temple quickly realized that their control over the Spirit Sea hadn't increased. They frowned slightly and raised their spirits to communicate with the Spirit Sea with all their might. At the border of the Sea of Light and the world of the Spirit Sea, in the Ball of Light, Lin Feng looked at this scene and smiled without saying a word. Rays of light poured into the heavenly scythe golden bead before shooting out again, landing on Lin Feng's true body and Brontosaurus's clone. That's right, to boost everyone's fighting spirit, I'll announce the reward for the competition. That is, Lin Feng said with a smile. Help me refine my spirit to return to the void faster. Chapter 849. On the other side, the people of Taishu Temple were in a bad mood. Other than Dao Venerable Tai Wan and Shoichi Dashin, everyone else frowned slightly. Even Lin Daohan, who was always calm, raised his eyebrows. Does the master of Xian Gate have such strong magic arts? They were 7 people working together to try to control the Spirit Sea. However, even though the other side was at a disadvantage, they didn't lose. This surprised the big shots of Taishu Temple. I'm afraid it's not the master of Xian Gate. It's related to Yudu race. Dao Venerable Tai Wan closed his eyes, and his expression was calm. In the battle back then, Yudu race suffered heavy casualties, just like our Taishu Temple. Other than Heavenly Sea Yudu, many experts died, but their potential is still strong. Dao Venerable Yu Yuan's expression turned cold. The master of Xian Gate is actually colluding with Yudu race? Kai Fengzhou shook his head. Looking at his actions, I'm afraid he won't collude with Yudu race. Either Yudu race is being used by him to delay us, or he doesn't know, or he's being used by Yudu race to guide the power of Yudu in. Shoichi Dashin said silently, sense carefully. They have a lot of people, but their power is scattered. However, their foundation isn't weak, as if they aren't using their full strength. That's obviously impossible, so the only possibility is that Yudu race didn't enter the Spirit Sea, or Heavenly Sea Yudu left behind a setup, or Master of Xian Gate executed a divine art to guide their demonic power in, Dao Venerable Tai Wan said. This also explains why they are at a disadvantage. It's because they are not really in the spiritual sea, Daoi Dao Master said. Otherwise, Yudu race wouldn't lose to the 7 of us after hiding for so long and gathering the power of all the strong practitioners of their race. Lin Daohan said, since we can't find the location of Master of Xian Gate and the rest, I'll take the lead. Let's maintain our pace. We have the upper hand, so let's fight steadily and end this quickly. We can't give them a chance to change. Dao Venerable Tai Wan and Shoichi Dashin nodded in approval. The big shots of Taishu Temple stopped talking and calmed down to continue connecting the great Tao of heaven and earth in the Spirit Sea. At the border of the world of the Spirit Sea and the Ocean of Light, Lin Feng silently looked at the undulating waves in the Ocean of Light. His main body and the lightning dragon clone were still immersed in the art of Tao. Meanwhile, the clone of the divine god of battle had also sat down with his legs crossed. He raised his head and stared at the sky-seizing golden orb that was emitting mystical glows. The smile on his face grew wider. At this moment, in the void battlefield, in the chaotic space, a huge array pattern flashed with dazzling light. Purple light flickered within the spell formation, and countless bolts of lightning flickered within. These bolts of lightning were not the usual greenish-purple color. Instead, they came in all sorts of colors. Red, yellow, green, blue, white, black. There were all sorts of colors, and the entire void was transformed into a sea of lightning. Suddenly, a tall young man walked out of the sea of lightning. This young man was dressed in a purple robe with a golden fur coat on the outside. He was extremely tall, but his figure was well proportioned. He was tall and handsome, tall and straight, but not bulky and cumbersome. His entire body seemed to contain an extremely terrifying explosive power, causing others to be terrified. He had red lips, white teeth, and eyes that shone like stars. It was hard to tell his age from his appearance. He looked like a teenager, but he also looked like he was in his 20s or 30s. He looked extraordinarily handsome, and his smooth, jet-black hair hung loosely behind him. As the young man walked forward, golden and green light flashed across his body. There seemed to be countless storms and lightning surging under his skin. His blood and chi boiled like the scorching sun. The scorching, masculine blood and chi gradually condensed into a halo that enveloped his body. Within the halo, there was a huge demonic beast that kept bobbing up and down. The Shen was a fish. It was jet black and extremely huge. Its body was tens of thousands of kilometers long. The Fu was a bird. It was covered in green feathers and had a golden beak. There were white feathers on its head. When it spread its wings, it was thousands of kilometers wide. The Kuan Peng. Although the halo did not seem large, the space was folded and extended. Anyone who saw it could feel the shocking size of the Kuan Peng. Just like that, the young man strode forward in the sea of lightning, completely disregarding the layers of lightning. When the colorful and terrifying lightning landed on his body, it created countless sparks and turned into electric snakes that slithered around. However, the tall young man did not seem to notice it. He chuckled softly. Is this a formation set up by a primordial spirit embodiment realm cultivator? If you're using the Grand Emperor's chaotic whole immortal slaying lightning, or the Nine Heavens divine lightning of the Angjia clan and Purple Sky Dao, it would not be good for me to take it head-on. However, I can't even react to this lightning technique. Of all the techniques in the world, the one I'm least afraid of is the lightning technique. As he spoke, the void above the young man's head suddenly split open, and a chaotic whole furnace appeared. Within the furnace, formless storms roared continuously, and layers of chaotic space surged. The shadow of a huge ferocious beast also appeared in the chaotic whole furnace. It looked like a yellow sack and was as red as alchemic fire. It had 6 legs and 4 wings, but it did not have a face. One of the 4 primordial beasts, Chaos. The moment the chaotic shadow appeared, a majestic force that could shatter space surged out, stirring up the winds and clouds in all directions. The young man was in the void battlefield, the most chaotic place in the heaven primordial world. With the chaos force stirring up, the already unstable void became even more chaotic. Countless spaces shattered, reformed, and shattered again. This majestic force directly swept away the tens of thousands of lightning bolts in front of him. In the void, a black-robed cultivator's face turned green. Rumor has it that he heavily injured a demon race great sage that has already cultivated to the primordial true spirit. It seems that it's true. Fortunately, the news has already been sent to King Taishan. I'll retreat first and wait for King Taishan and the others to arrive. The Underworld Hall hid in the King of the Underworld world all year round, and they had to go through the void battlefield to enter and exit. They were probably one of the forces that had the deepest understanding of the void battlefield in the entire heaven primordial world. In this foreign world that was filled with void turbulence, even primordial spirit realm experts would find it difficult to maintain smooth communication with each other once they were far away. However, after many years of exploration, the Underworld Hall had finally found some tricks. A natural-born paragon, a young prodigy, Shi Tianhao, you really live up to your reputation. The tall young man was naturally Lin Feng's youngest male disciple, the youngest Yuanying cultivator in history, the young prodigy Shi Tianhao. The black-robed cultivator thought, I must meet up with King Taishan and the others as soon as possible. This void battlefield is still troublesome, especially with the sudden large-scale void turbulence. Even we from the Underworld Hall can't do anything about it. Under King Tai Shan's command, they had come to the Void battlefield under the orders of the Underworld Hall's master, Su Anda, to search for Shi Tianhao in the Void battlefield and capture him alive. With special methods and their familiarity with the Void battlefield, they had roughly found the area where Shi Tianhao was. However, a sudden void turbulence had scattered them. The black-robed cultivator wanted to leave, but Shi Tianhao laughed. "You came to provoke me. It's too late for you to run now." As he let out a long roar, the Kun Peng silhouette in the halo around him turned into the shape of a peng. Then, he shot through the void like a bolt of lightning, leaving behind a path that seemed to be paved with wind and lightning. Shi Tianhao was so fast that he was already in front of the black-robed cultivator just as he was about to leave. "Those lightning techniques you used just now were trying to attack my soul through my physical body." A technique that combines magic power and soul power, an inheritance of the Underworld Hall? Shi Tianhao stared at the black-robed cultivator. "I was just about to look for you." Light flickered above his head, and a huge figure suddenly appeared. It was indomitable, with 4 heads and 8 arms, and a large number of tornadoes and lightning circling around its body. Heaven, earth, wind, lightning, water, fire, mountain, and lake, 8 different phenomena turned into 8 arms, stirring up the void. Of the 4 heads, the first one's face was chaotic and blurry, as if layers of space had folded together. The second one's eyes seemed to be filled with endless time when it opened and closed, and the third one was shouting at the sky with a violent aura like a torrent. The last one's face was ordinary and expressionless. When one looked into its eyes, one could only feel an endless aura of desolation, desolation, and desolation. On top of each of the 4 heads was a huge chaotic cauldron. In 3 of the cauldrons, the figures of the 3 great ferocious beasts, Tao Tai, Hun Dun, and Swan Ni, flashed. Although the last cauldron was empty, it exuded an extremely complete aura. Once it refined Xiongqi's blood essence, it would immediately reach perfection. Laws of heaven and earth. Shi Tianhao stepped forward, and the huge heaven and earth avatar above his head did the same. The black-robed cultivator's expression changed, and he wanted to escape, but he saw Shi Tianhao raise his right hand. Universe. The chaotic void immediately froze and returned to peace. However, the black-robed cultivator's escape route was also frozen, and a powerful concept that filled the entire universe suppressed him. The black-robed cultivator snorted coldly, and clouds of black smoke suddenly surged out of his body and spread out. There were streaks of gray light flowing within the black smoke, and he was using the King of the Underworld's unification sect's secret technique to continuously dispel the spatial suppression power of Shi Tianhao's use symbol art. However, right after that, the cauldron above Shi Tianhao's heaven and earth avatar, which was infused with the power of chaos, spewed out chaotic energy that could shatter the void, and combined with Shi Tianhao's use symbol art. 1 life and 1 destruction, 1 movement and 1 stillness, 1 destruction and 1 establishment, formed a powerful force that warped and opposed each other. It immediately broke apart the black smoke and gray light around the emissary of the underworld. Right after that, a light flashed above Shi Tianhao's head, and the huge Kunpeng Palace appeared. It was completely black, and it smashed down on the emissary's head. The black-robed cultivator unleashed his Yuan spirit incarnation to resist, but he was still no match for the Kunpeng Palace's weight. Shi Tianhao's heaven and earth avatar stood on the roof of the Kunpeng Palace, and the suppression power of the magic treasure became even stronger. When Shi Tianhao revealed the Kunpeng Palace, the emissary of the underworld had no hope of fighting back. After a fierce battle, he was finally killed by Shi Tianhao. The Battle of the Yingxi is over. Master is missing. Yun Song was kidnapped by Golden Cicada. Yujing Mountain appeared and escaped from the void. The Zhu family joined forces to destroy the Xian clan. After killing the emissary of the underworld, Shi Tianhao left behind a remnant soul to interrogate him, but he obtained a lot of information that exceeded his expectations. My father was just captured by another emissary of the underworld? Chapter 850. Shi Tianhao's eyes flickered and finally turned ice cold. Without wasting any time, he transformed into a rainbow and flew away at high speed. After a short while, Shi Tianhao's heart suddenly stirred. He turned his head and saw a gray light flash past. It was a black-robed underworld hall emissary at the nascent soul incarnation realm. There was a gray mass of air in the other party's palm, but it was a small world of consciousness formed from magic power. In this gray world, there was a man who looked to be in his 30s or 40s sitting cross-legged. He was extraordinarily handsome, resolute, and unyielding. However, this man's face was a little pale at the moment, and it was obvious that he was injured. Upon closer inspection, his facial features resembled a younger Shi Tianhao, or a slightly older Shi Tianhao. If anyone from the Shi clan or the Great Qin dynasty saw him, they would immediately recognize that this man was Shi Zhongtian's son and Shi Tianhao's father, Shi Xiling. The underworld hall emissary's expression changed slightly. He had just received a notification from his companions that Shi Tianhao had indeed appeared in this area. He was about to meet up with King Taishan, but who would have thought that he would run into Shi Tianhao head-on? Shi Xiling, who was in the gray mass of air, seemed to have sensed something. He raised his head and looked through the thick gray mist. When he saw Shi Tianhao in the distant void, his expression immediately changed. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice was cut off by the gray world and couldn't reach Shi Tianhao's ears. Shi Tianhao didn't say a word. His figure flashed through the void and appeared in front of the underworld hall emissary. "Don't you want your father's life anymore?" The underworld hall emissary shouted sternly. However, before he could finish speaking, he saw a shadow flicker above Shi Tianhao's head, and the universal Dharma idol appeared. Then, he heard Shi Tianhao shout in a low voice, "Universe." The underworld hall emissary's mind went into a slight trance. He felt his magic power circulate, his consciousness thoughts, and everything else come to a standstill. It was as if his time had stopped. In a state of almost losing control, he took off his human form and revealed his essence soul incarnation. It was in the form of a black saber. After his primordial spirit was suppressed by Shi Tianhao's time character art, the emissary of the underworld hall could no longer maintain his human form. However, when his primordial spirit incarnation appeared, he felt invigorated and broke free from the restraints of Shi Tianhao's time character art. A late-stage Yuanying cultivator suppressing my essence soul avatar still has such a strong effect. The underworld hall emissary's heart trembled. However, before he could react, his vision went black the moment he broke free from the Ian symbol art. An enormous hall that looked like a heavenly palace smashed down on his head. The emissary didn't even have the time to destroy the small gray world before he had to retreat. Otherwise, he would be smashed by Kunpeng Hall first. However, Shi Tianhao's attacks did not stop there. Above the head of the Dharma form, the great furnace that was imbued with the power of the Swanee opened with a loud rumble, and raging flames fell down. These blazing flames didn't seem to be as agile as ordinary flames. Instead, they seemed stiff and clumsy, as if they were metal statues carved into the shape of flames. Green light flickered, and they revealed a strong and sharp concept of strength. This was the extreme evil fire that Shi Tianhao had refined after comprehending the 4 divisions heaven-opening scripture, smelting the essence blood of the Swanee, and studying the Buddhist unmovable Buddha scripture. It was stubborn, vicious, and difficult to extinguish. Once it came into contact with an enemy, it would incessantly burn. The emissary could only retreat again. He felt helpless. He clearly had a hostage in his hands, but he didn't have the time to deal any damage. Retreat. His heart was filled with determination. The black saber formed by his primordial spirit suddenly turned into a sharp black light and slashed at the small gray world. This time, he was risking his own injuries to slash at Shi Xiling, who was imprisoned in the gray world. He wanted to force Shi Tianhao to stop. Otherwise, even if he was seriously injured, Shi Xiling would undoubtedly die and be buried with him. Unexpectedly, Shi Tianhao suddenly changed his attack. The great furnace of the chaotic cauldron above the Dharma form opened with a loud rumble, and the power of chaos transformed into a divine wind that shattered the void and blasted at the black saber and the grey world. It looked like he wanted to destroy the black saber and the grey world together. In the grey world, Shi Xiling was stunned, but his eyes soon revealed an ominous glint. He suddenly brought his palms together, and the grey world where he was located turned into a huge ball of light. The scene inside was grotesque and varied, and all kinds of things were born from it. However, it was lifeless, sinister, and terrifying as it resisted Shi Tianhao's attack. But in the end, he was still caught unprepared and suffered heavy injuries along with the cultivator who had transformed into the black saber. The black saber was smashed by the Kunpeng Hall, and the grey ball of light scattered to form a primordial spirit incarnation in the shape of a grey wheel. Apart from that, there was also an arm floating in the void. Shi Tianhao continued to attack, forcing the grey wheel and the black saber back. Then, he grabbed the arm with one hand. Your divine arts are indeed exquisite. After obtaining my father's arm, you can transform into my father's appearance. Your magic power aura, bloodline aura, and consciousness undulations are all exactly the same. There are no flaws at all. Shi Tianhao stared coldly at the grey wheel. The three great furnaces of the chaotic cauldron opened at the same time. The Taotai, Taowu, and primal chaos shadows all roared ferociously, driving the Kunpeng Hall towards the other party. The black blade was sucked in by the suction force of the furnace of Taotai. Then, the furnace of primal chaos and the furnace of Bai and spun, and the three furnaces faced each other. They closed together and swallowed the black blade, disappearing into the void together. At the same time, Shi Tianhao exerted force with the universe and Ian arts once again, fixing the grey wheel in place. The Kunpeng Hall smashed upwards, and the grey wheel immediately dimmed. Shi Tianhao took a step forward and added another 8 trigram sky collapsing hammer, causing the grey wheel to be full of cracks. He opened his hand. His palm, which was as white as jade and suffused with a red luster, instantly erupted with terrifying power. It was like the claw of a demon king, tightly gripping the grey wheel in his hand, rendering it unable to move. Do you think your little tricks will work? Shi Tianhao tightened his grip, and the wheel immediately let out a mournful cry. Its appearance changed to that of a black-robed elder with a wrinkled face. He looked at Shi Tianhao with unwillingness. You can't see through my phantom demon transformation art unless you know that the real Shi Xiling has already lost an arm. His art was good in every aspect, but he had used Shi Xiling's arm to transform, so the arm had to remain intact. He couldn't simulate the appearance of the real arm, which was the only loophole. However, the possibility of verifying it in such a chaotic environment was too low. How unlucky must he be to encounter such a situation? Other than King Tai Shan who had formulated the plan, the other Underworld Hall emissaries were also fooled. The black-robed elder roared, Shi Xiling is indeed in our hands. This arm is proof. Shi Tianhao sneered, you're too unlucky. There were light shadows in those ruins, and I saw with my own eyes that you severed my father's arm. My father escaped with injuries, and I can confirm that although my father has lost an arm and I can't reunite with him now, he's definitely safe and sound. There are many disadvantages to the void battlefield, but there are also many advantages. Upon hearing this, the black-robed elder fell into complete despair. Shi Tianhao glared at him. Pretending to be my father to scare me? It's not enough even if you die 10,000 times. You'll have to pay for severing my father's arm with your life. As he said this, another heavy punch landed on the black-robed elder's chest. His primordial spirit immediately disintegrated. The emissary from the Underworld Hall who had been swallowed by Shi Tianhao's 3 great cauldron was already heavily injured. The cauldron was opened, and the Kunpeng Hall was directly smashed into smithereens. The one who led the team to intercept me was a void return cultivator. Other than the Mount Shu Sword Sect, the Reincarnation Sect, and the Eastern Heavenly Gate, the Underworld Hall is also plotting against our sect. The Underworld Hall Master has even personally come. Shi Tianhao's eyes were cold. His body turned into a rainbow and pierced through the layers of space. He sped at full speed, searching for a weak point in the space. He left the void battlefield and rushed back to Yujing Mountain. There should be a weaker space barrier a little further ahead. When the time comes, I can directly exit from there and return to the boundless world. If my calculations are correct, the exit should be in the Kunlun mountain range. As Shi Tianhao flew through the void, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It looked extremely strange. It was a middle-aged man with refined features. He was no more than 30 or 40 years old. His face was like jade, and his appearance was elegant. 3 strands of black beard fluttered in the wind. They were combed very neatly, and he wore a jade-green robe with a jade belt around his waist. However, his arms, from his shoulders to his fingertips, were completely made up of eerie white bones. All the bones were crystal clear and as white as jade. They exuded a chilling aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. The white bone arms were at least 100 feet long. The thickness where they were connected to the shoulders was still normal. However, the closer they were to the palms, the thicker they became. In the end, a huge white bone claw covered the sky. This person cultivated in the white bone path, a super sect of the demonic Tao that had arisen in ancient times and perished in medieval times. He had already reached the realm of refining his spirit to return to the void. This middle-aged scholar looked at Shi Tianhao and chuckled. I'm King Taishan, Shi Tianhao. I know that you 2 brothers are all quite extraordinary. At the very least, that senior brother of yours, Wang Lin, has a cultivation base that even a cultivator of the return to void stage may not be a match for if he brings along his magic treasure. King Taishan was also a little depressed. If possible, he also didn't want to take turns to intercept Shi Tianhao with his subordinates. However, this damned spatial turbulence had forcefully turned their encirclement into a battle of obstruction. I'm not asking to definitely kill or defeat you today, but don't even think about leaving this place in a short period of time. Before he could finish speaking, he saw Shi Tianhao suddenly transform into a streak of light and charge toward him. Interceptions one after another had already made him extremely irritated. Who had the time to waste talking nonsense with you? I'm going back to Jade Capital Mountain. Anyone who stands in my way must die. King Taishan didn't dare to be careless as he watched Shi Tianhao charge toward him like a massive primordial beast. The massive bone claw on his right hand suddenly transformed into 5 long white bone whips, which lashed toward Shi Tianhao. Meanwhile, his left bone claw clenched into a fist before opening again, and it suddenly exploded, transforming into thousands of streaks of grayish-white light that descended upon Shi Tianhao's head. Shi Tianhao summoned the Kunpeng Palace and blocked the 5 long white bone whips. The thick white bone whip struck the roof of the Kunpeng Palace, causing it to tremble violently. At this moment, the thousands of streaks of grayish-white light that had transformed from King Taishan's left bone claw weaved together to form a massive net that enveloped Shi Tianhao. At the same time, the grayish-white light seemed to be attracted by a powerful force, and all of them began to rush toward Shi Tianhao in the center of the net. With a loud boom, all of the grayish-white light suddenly paused, transforming back into a massive bone claw. It firmly grabbed Shi Tianhao, and then tightened. King Taishan immediately realized that something was wrong. He clenched his hand, thinking that even if he couldn't crush Shi Tianhao to death, he would at least be able to injure him and break a few of his bones. But unexpectedly, Shi Tianhao didn't even budge. Shi Tianhao's expression did not change in the slightest when King Taishan's skeletal claw tightened. He coldly stared at him, a violent and vigorous stream of essence qi shooting into the sky from the top of his head, and the images of the 4 divisions and 8 trigrams flashed in his eyes. Chapter 851. Shi Tianhao had temporarily fused his dharma with his physical body, further enhancing his physical strength. King Taishan was shocked. Although I've heard that this kid's physical body is extremely strong, invincible below the primordial divinity realm, isn't this a little too strong? Even a primordial divinity incarnation realm expert would be injured if I grab him like this. Shi Tianhao stared coldly at King Taishan. His arms shook violently, shaking off King Taishan's claw. Then, he raised his right hand and smashed the 8-trigram sky collapsing hammer, imbued with the power to shatter the void, on the wrist of the bone claw, completely shattering it. Shi Tianhao looked relaxed. He stepped on the white bone of King Taishan's left arm, as if he was climbing a mountain. He walked up towards King Taishan's torso and head. King Taishan's left arm shook, wanting to throw Shi Tianhao off. However, Shi Tianhao's steps seemed light, but they were rooted to the ground, completely unmoved. This was the result of him merging Bai An's innate mystique. Among the 4 primordial ferocious beasts, the Tao Wu was the most stubborn. Its innate ability was demonic qi. At the same time, it possessed an unyielding offensive ability like a maggot attached to a bone and an indestructible defense. Being entangled by Bai An's innate mystique, it was too difficult for King Taishan to shake Shi Tianhao off. But Shi Tianhao's feet were extremely fast. In a flash, he was already in front of King Taishan, punching at his head. Primordial Bone Shroud. King Taishan uttered a few words. His head and torso were wrapped in a gray-white bone ball, forcibly withstanding Shi Tianhao's punch. It was a spirit-nurturing grade artifact of his. This artifact had no other use but a defensive function, so its defensive power was quite impressive. Seeing this, Shi Tianhao smiled and softly spat out a word, boom. All the energy in his body surged, drawing all the chaotic and mixed spiritual energy in the void battlefield towards him. In the next moment, the spiritual energy suddenly quieted down. It did not disappear without a trace. Instead, it was preparing for an even greater explosion. It was like the calm before the storm. His fist was still pressed against King Taishan's primordial bone clothes, not moving away. At this time, all of the power exploded like a cosmic flood, engulfing the world's creation and all living things, rushing out with an unstoppable momentum. A crack immediately appeared on King Taishan's primordial skeleton robe. Quick! King Taishan's right-hand bone claw continued to compress and condense. In the end, the sky-blotting bone claw turned into a bean-sized pill. White bone sword pellet. The next moment, the pill flashed and turned into a pale white sword light. It instantly tore through the void and pierced the back of Shi Tianhao's head. White bone lightstream sword. If this sword were to hit, even Shi Tianhao's extremely strong body would not be able to withstand it. His head would be pierced through. Shi Tianhao did not even look back. His left hand grabbed the pale white sword light. The 2 fierce beasts, Tao Tai and Swan Ni, exerted their magical powers at the same time. One devoured the heaven and the earth, while the other was stubborn and unbreakable. The 2 worked together to wear down the pale white sword light. And at this time, the rock palace crashed down once more. The dark green palace had already turned completely black. It gave up on the agility of shifting, and instead increased its strength to the limit. With a bang, it completely smashed apart the cracked primal essence bone suit. The white bone ball cracked open, revealing King Taishan's cold face. His treasure was broken, and he was extremely distressed. However, he was as calm as before, like a hunter waiting for his prey to fall into his trap. He chanted a mantra, and a 6 harmonies pagoda suddenly appeared above his and Shi Tianhao's heads. It was small and exquisite like a crystal, sparkling and translucent. The pagoda was hexagonal and had 6 floors. It was no more than 6 inches tall, but the eaves, tiles, and bricks of the pagoda were clearly visible. They were all made of bones. Transformation grade treasure, white bone 6 harmonies pagoda. Rise! King Taishan let out a low roar, and the white bone 6 harmonies pagoda soared into the sky. When it rose into the air, it instantly transformed into a gigantic pagoda of 60 feet tall. It directly enveloped Shi Tianhao, who had temporarily lost the protection of the rock palace and was also busy dealing with the white bone sword of flowing light. Boom! Boundless wretched green 6 harmonies white bone flames filled the interior of the pagoda, trying to burn Shi Tianhao to death. Burn him to death. Burn him to ashes. Burn him to ashes. Outside the pagoda, King Tai Shan blocked the Kunpeng Palace as he spat out mouthful after mouthful of green yin flames onto the Whitebone Six Harmonies pagoda. His magic power of the Return to Void stage was fully channeled into this life-bonded treasure, pushing the power of the transformation-grade Whitebone Six Harmonies pagoda to the extreme. The combination of man and treasure increased their firepower. Inside the pagoda was a dark green world. The Whitebone Six Harmonies fire transformed into tens of thousands of thick green flame dragons that bombarded Shi Tianhao relentlessly. Under the siege of these raging yin flames, even Shi Tianhao's powerful physical body began to suffer damage. He activated the power of Tao Tai, but the rate at which he devoured the yin flames couldn't keep up with the rate at which the Whitebone Six Harmonies fire grew. He activated the power of the Tao Wu, but it couldn't withstand the scorching heat that could melt even the toughest iron. He activated the power of chaos and broke through some of the yin flames, but there were still many more. However, Shi Tianhao's expression remained unchanged. Silently looking at the raging sea of flames before him, he chuckled. Compared to my senior brother, you're still lacking. After chuckling, Shi Tianhao's expression turned cold. Those who stop me from returning to the mountain shall die. Before his voice had even faded, a dazzling light flashed from between his brows. The light was so bright that it transformed the interior of the Whitebone Six Harmonies pagoda into a vast expanse of white. The light didn't seem scorching, but the terrifying energy fluctuations it exuded shook the heavens. A large number of talisman characters appeared in the light, forming one profound pattern after another. In the next instant, they suddenly scattered and regrouped, forming completely different patterns, one after another, repeating the cycle. The light shot out from between Shi Tianhao's brows, turning into a shocking rainbow. Within the rainbow, the figures of gods and Buddhas flickered, like a great bell, and the sound of the heavenly Tao shaking chanting rang out incessantly. This rainbow shot out like a sharp blade, directly splitting the green sea of flames and killing the tens of thousands of green flame dragons. Shi Tianhao's divine light of creation. The divine light of termination. It had once been seized by Shi Tianyi, but in the end, it had finally returned to its rightful owner. Within it, the concept of the power of termination was the end point of all things, the breaking point. Wherever it passed, everything else would be interrupted, ending prematurely and being forced to draw a full stop. Wherever the divine light of finality passed, thousands of jade flame dragons were cut in half. Some were cut in half, some were decapitated, and some were decapitated. Anything that stood in the way of the divine light of finality was cut in half. The indestructible light that seemed to be able to end all things forcibly broke through the pale green yin flames within the Six Harmonies pagoda. King Tai Shan was paying close attention to everything that was happening within the Six Harmonies pagoda, and he gulped upon seeing this. Six Harmonies Skeleton Flame King. He tossed aside the Kunpeng Palace, and his entire body transformed into a streak of grayish-white light before flying into the Six Harmonies pagoda. His body instantly transformed into a massive green skeleton. He had manifested his return to void stage body to battle against Shi Tianhao. The Kunpeng Palace continued to bombard the Six Harmonies pagoda from the outside, but the skeleton completely ignored them. Instead, it joined its palms together and charged toward Shi Tianhao. The seemingly boundless Six Harmonies white-bone flames became even more exuberant, and as large amounts of them poured onto the green skeleton's body, it also transformed into an even more powerful sea of flames, which attacked Shi Tianhao from all directions. Shi Tianhao raised his head slightly, and his divine light of doom flashed through the sea of flames, tearing through the green yin flames before landing on the skeleton that King Tai Shan had transformed into. The green skeleton evaded in time, but one of its arms was also sliced off. If a normal person's return to void stage body was injured like this, they would immediately be severely wounded. In particular, Shi Tianhao's divine light of doom was extremely miraculous. It could completely sever the spirituality of all things, and it was extremely difficult to heal and recover from. However, King Tai Shan cultivated in the paramount great Tao of the White Bone Tao, the omniscient manifestation White Bone Tao, and it had its own unique characteristics. A piece of white bone appeared within the sea of flames, and it was immediately charred green by the raging green flames before reattaching itself to the green skeleton's shoulder. However, the lustrous luster of the entire skeleton had dimmed significantly. At the same time, without the protection of the Kunpeng Palace, Shi Tianhao was also severely wounded by King Tai Shan's powerful attack. Not only had his body, which had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times, been ravaged by the Yin flames, but the 6 harmonies white bone flames had also been infused into the king of the underworld's Dao inheritance, which inflicted even more damage to his consciousness and Yuanying. Shi Tianhao's expression remained unchanged, and he let loose a low roar as another extremely dazzling divine light burst forth from his glabella. It was as if this divine light was imbued with the secrets of all things and the passage of time. Countless patterns of light also surged forth, transforming into layers of auspicious clouds that enshrouded Shi Tianhao's entire body. His consciousness, Yuanying, and physical body all quickly recovered, and he was as good as new. This wasn't a healing process, nor was it a reversal of time, nor was it a transformation of the real from the illusory to the real. Instead, he was able to instantly return to his original, unscathed state. Even the slightest change would return him to his original state. Shi Tianhao had unleashed another beam of divine light of creation. Divine light of origin. The divine light of doom attacked while the divine light of origin defended. Shi Tianhao's combat prowess had become extremely terrifying. Ha! As the battle reached its climax, Shi Tianhao flew up and suppressed King Tai Shan with the divine light of doom. Meanwhile, he himself arrived at the top of the pagoda. Under King Tai Shan's furious gaze, he heavily punched the top of the pagoda. The green flame fire that filled the sky exploded with a loud rumble, and the 6 harmonies pagoda seemed to rain a green rain of fire. As if doomsday had arrived, the earth quaked and the mountains shook. The world inside the pagoda shattered with a loud rumble, and Shi Tianhao's vision regained its brightness. He leaped up and rushed out of the 6 harmonies pagoda. At the same time, the rock palace fiercely smashed into the already cracked 6 harmonies pagoda. Inside the 6 harmonies pagoda, apart from King Tai Shan's 6 harmonies skeleton king of flame, another green radiance bone dragon appeared. It was howling in pain, and its body was covered in cracks. It was the 6 harmonies pagoda's artifact spirit. As soon as he emerged from the 6 harmonies pagoda, Shi Tianhao withdrew his divine light of Genesis and unleashed his divine light of doom to its maximal extent. A brilliant light flashed, and King Tai Shan's 6 harmonies skeleton king of flame was completely sliced in half. King Tai Shan was unable to recover this time, and he was directly sliced in half by Shi Tianhao's divine light of doom. His massive return to void stage body exploded amid a wail of anguish. The damaged 6 harmonies pagoda tremored violently in the air before transforming into a streak of green flames and flying away. Shi Tianhao's gaze was cold. Activating the 2 creation divine lights together, his mana was rapidly depleting. Even though his mana volume and density were the highest among all of Lin Feng's disciples, and he was able to dominate almost everyone below the primordial spirit realm, at this moment he did not have much mana left. However, he still activated the rock palace and transformed it into a streak of green light, which blocked the 6 harmonies pagoda's path again before crashing viciously into it again. It was too late to run now. Leave your life here. A powerful sense of fear emanated from the exquisite green skull atop the 6 harmonies pagoda. No. Chapter 852. The projection formed by the jade skull was none other than King Tai Shan. He was extremely feeble at this moment, but he was also recovering at a slow rate. Green flames danced around his body as he gradually reformed into the 6 harmonies skeleton king of flame. The white bone path's death substitution technique was unfathomable. If Shi Tianhao thought that he had slain King Tai Shan, then he would use the white bone 6 harmonies pagoda to escape and be reborn. Although his power would be greatly diminished in the short term, he would eventually recover. Unfortunately, Shi Tianhao had already sensed something amiss when his divine light of the end struck his return to void stage Dharma body. Now that he had seen the white bone 6 harmonies pagoda flee, how could he not understand? The Kunpeng Palace blocked the battered white bone Six Harmonies Pagoda while Shi Tianhao launched a punch toward the jade skull. The jade skull opened its mouth and spat out a massive white skeleton that pounced toward Shi Tianhao. Its bones were as transparent as crystal, and a foul stench wafted out from its body. Shi Tianhao harumphed coldly. Bolstered by the power of chaos, he shattered the white skeleton with a single punch. The disintegrated white skeleton roared with rage as its shattered bones transformed into a Yin character, which continued to charge toward Shi Tianhao. Shi Tianhao's expression remained unchanged as he activated the power of the Taotai. The fingers on his left hand spread open like a black hole, grabbing onto the white bone Yin talisman before shattering it with a punch with his right hand. The shattered white bones transformed back into a skeleton that howled with rage. However, before it could even move, the light before its eyes suddenly dimmed as Shi Tianhao stomped down on its head. Boom! This time, the white skeleton was completely crushed by Shi Tianhao's stomp. At the same time, Shi Tianhao's hand had already gripped onto the jade skull. The unmovable flames of extreme evil burned fiercely as the projection of King Tai Shan's Dharma body collapsed. Under the despairing gaze of King Tai Shan, Shi Tianhao opened his mouth and spat out a single word, Hong. A violent force erupted in an instant, directly crushing the jade skull into smithereens. The last thing King Tai Shan saw was Shi Tianhao crushing him, taking his broken white bone Six Harmonies Pagoda and primordial bone robe. Then, Shi Tianhao drove the Kunpeng Palace away without looking back, completely ignoring him. If he could activate the death substitution technique again, he would naturally survive, but unfortunately, he was already powerless. Shi Tianhao had also realized this, so he didn't even glance at King Tai Shan as he hurried on his way. Because he was certain that King Tai Shan would definitely die. For Shi Tianhao, there seemed to be a fire burning in his heart. He wanted to rush back to Mount Yujing as soon as possible. After the battle with the king of Taishan, Shi Tianhao used the mysterious power of the Origin Divine Light to heal his wounds. However, he was a little tired at the moment. His spiritual power was almost completely depleted. Sitting in the Kunpeng Palace, he calculated where he would leave the void battlefield. At the same time, he took out a medium-sized cloud forest tree trunk that he had refined continuously and absorbed its essence energy to quickly recover his almost exhausted spiritual power. I'm here. He sat in the Kunpeng Palace, calculating where he would leave the void battlefield. At the same time, he took out a medium-sized cloud forest tree trunk that he had refined continuously and absorbed its essence energy to quickly recover his almost exhausted spiritual power. I'm here. After a while, Shi Tianhao's spirit was shaken. The rock hall shook, and a majestic power vibrated. In a certain area of the void battlefield in front of him, a strange crack suddenly appeared in the chaotic yet fragile boundary barrier. Shi Tianhao was about to drive the Kunpeng Palace out when the spatial boundary barrier suddenly began to twist violently. The boundary barrier created by the void battlefield was extremely unstable to begin with, but now it was showing signs of mending. Even worse, Shi Tianhao was currently in the boundary barrier. Now that it was mending and squeezing him in the middle, the terrifying boundary power was even stronger than King Tai Shan's attack. I know you're in a hurry to return to the Divine Land, so I've been waiting for you here. In the sky, a black-robed cultivator saw this and was about to reveal an expression of ecstasy. But before a smile could bloom on his face, a voice suddenly rang out from the Kunpeng Palace, You! A mysterious power directly froze the distorted boundary barrier. Although it would only be an instant before the violent and distorted boundary power broke free of Shi Tianhao's Yu symbol art, in that instant, a bright and resplendent divine light appeared in the Kunpeng Palace and illuminated the heavens. Illuminated by this divine light, the boundary barrier that had been frozen by the Yu symbol art immediately calmed down and returned to normal. It was the Origin Divine Light. The black-robed cultivator felt a chill in his heart. He wanted to escape, but he heard the voice from the Kunpeng Palace again, You! The essence spirit of the black-robed cultivator froze and his reaction came to a halt. By the time his essence spirit manifestation broke free, he saw an extremely majestic beam of light that seemed to be able to sever everything streaked across the void like a rainbow and slashed at him. Divine light of the end. Leaving behind the black-robed cultivator who had been cut in half, Shi Tianhao's footsteps never stopped. He had already driven the Kunpeng Palace through the boundary barrier. The scenery in front of him suddenly opened up. It was so familiar. It was the boundless world, the divine land, and the Kunlun mountain range. Shi Tianhao sat in the Kunpeng Palace and quickly rushed in the direction of the Cloud Peak Mirror Lake. Halfway there, Shi Tianhao suddenly looked up, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. Is there no end to it? The world within a radius of 1,000 miles shook and twisted together. Countless spaces overlapped and lost their original appearance. They stacked together like a sparkling transparent wall, forming a square that enveloped Shi Tianhao. Shu Shan's Shaozi sword. One of the fastest escape techniques in the Divine Land. It was a great Dao technique that integrated the mysteries of space and time. A middle-aged man appeared in the void. He had an elegant bearing and wore a smile, but no one dared to underestimate him. They could clearly see him standing there, but it seemed impossible to determine his true location. He seemed to be standing in many layers of time and space at the same time, representing countless possibilities and drifting erratically. It was Shu Shan's Shaozi sword venerable. He held a long sword, but only the hilt could be seen. The blade could not be seen, and only a faint sword light could be seen in the air. One of Shu Shan's 6 meridians immortal swords, the Shaozi sword venerable's legacy treasure. He saw Shi Tianhao and was a little surprised. Elder Jia left suddenly, as if he had something to hide. He asked me to wait here, but who knew that this Shi Tianhao would come? Forget it, I've already decided to fight with Xianmen Tianzong this time, so it doesn't matter where I am. Shaozi sword venerable was about to speak, but he saw Shi Tianhao expressionlessly step through the void and already in front of him. He was so fast that he was only slightly slower than his Shaozi sword. Shaozi sword venerable raised his eyebrows. Disciple of the Mystic Gate Master, you are the fastest, but you are still not as fast as my Shaozi sword. In an instant, he revealed the image of a swordsman 20 feet tall, wearing a high hat and ancient clothes, and the long sword in his hand turned into a cold light. Shaozi sword venerable, who had directly manifested his void-returned Dharma body, flashed, and his sword intent surged. In an instant, it seemed as if he had transformed into hundreds of himself, but it was not a clone. Instead, he pushed his sword Dao cultivation to the extreme, and his primordial spirit escaped into multiple layers of time and space. The cold light flashed, and in an instant, it turned into a sky full of stars that flickered together. In an instant, it traversed thousands of layers of time and space, aiming to assassinate Shi Tianhao. The power of the Shaozi sword merged with Shaozi sword venerable's sword intent, causing his speed to rise to a higher level. At this moment, he used the Shaozi sword, and the momentum was even more terrifying. It was as if every point of the void around Shi Tianhao, and every position, there was a cold sword light emerging at the same time. The sky and the earth were all sealed off in all directions. This sword even produced a different effect. The Shaozi sword, which was extremely light and fast, struck out with a sense of returning to its original state, producing an extremely heavy sword intent that froze the space and time where Shi Tianhao was. Space was sealed, and there was no way to escape. Time was stopped, and there was no way to escape. The subtlety of Shu Shan's Shaozi sword lay in its extreme speed. Before the enemy could even react, they had already been hit by the sword. Although Shi Tianhao's speed was fast, at this moment, he was like a snail in the eyes of Shaozi sword venerable. Countless cold lights attacked Shi Tianhao at the same time. Not a single one of them was a feint. These were all terrifying attacks that originated from a great sword cultivator of the Void Return realm controlling an incarnation-grade treasure to attack. They passed through thousands of possibilities in space and time, transforming into real sword lights. Kunpeng Hall was pierced by numerous sword lights in an instant. Even though it had instantly turned black and defended with all its might, it was like a banana leaf under a storm. It trembled incessantly, and holes like a honeycomb were pierced through it. It was severely injured. At this moment, Shi Tianhao, who was standing at the top of Kunpeng Hall, was hit by hundreds of swords at the same time. However, Shaozi's sword venerable quickly realized that something was wrong. Although Shi Tianhao's robes were riddled with holes, under the tattered clothes, there were only hundreds of small red dots on his body that was like cast iron. There was not even a single obvious wound left on him. Shi Tianhao exhaled and smiled at Shaozi's sword venerable. In the eyes of Shaozi's sword venerable, it was as if a ferocious beast had opened its bloody mouth at him. In the next moment, Shi Tianhao's fierce punch was already flying towards Shaozi's sword venerable. Of the 6 pulse swords of Shushan, what Shi Tianhao cared about the least was the Shaozi sword venerable, which was the fastest and had the longest attack range, but the weakest in terms of pure attack power. Shaozi's sword venerable quickly pulled out his sword and retreated. He knew his own sword Dao well, and such a situation had happened before in history. However, as long as his speed was above Shi Tianhao's, even if he could not break through Shi Tianhao's powerful physical body, Shi Tianhao would not be able to hit him. Only he could attack, and Shi Tianhao would not be able to fight back. If 100 swords could not break through, then he would use 1,000 or 10,000 swords. As the saying goes, dripping water can penetrate a stone. If he just aimed at one point, he would be able to break through. However, just as Shi Tianhao threw out this punch, he spat out a word. Desolation. Shi Tianhao had created his own mystique, the last word of the black-yellow 4-word formula, the desolation word of the universe's desolation word. An extremely desolate and ancient aura spread out, primitive and vast. Wherever Shi Tianhao's spiritual power reached, heaven and earth turned into nothingness. All spiritual qi was obliterated, and everything returned to the barren, ignorant, and chaotic state when the universe was first formed. Wherever the spiritual power of the desolation word reached, the Shaozi sword venerable, which was extremely fast, also slowed down. The situation suddenly reversed. At this moment, Shaozi's sword venerable, whose face was full of shock, was the one who was as slow as a snail in the eyes of Shi Tianhao. Chapter 853. Wherever the power of Shi Tianhao's desolation formula reached, Shaozi's sword lord was immediately affected. Several of the fastest swords in the world seemed to be entangled with endless heavy shackles, as if they were stuck in a quagmire and unable to move an inch. Even the Shaozi sword, whose blade could not be seen, revealed its true appearance at this time. It looked like an extremely ordinary cyan steel sword. Shi Tianhao reached out and directly grabbed the blade, completely ignoring the sharpness of the Shaozi sword lord. He held on tightly to the blade, not letting Shaozi sword lord retreat. At the same time, a bright brilliance flashed from between his eyebrows. The divine light of finality that even Shaozi's sword lord felt terrified and threatened burst out, turning into a long rainbow that pierced through the heavens and earth, slashing towards Shaozi's sword lord. Shaozi's sword lord was also stimulated, and a sinister expression appeared on his usually elegant face. He did not abandon his sword to avoid Shi Tianhao's attack. Instead, with a long roar, the primordial spirit of his void-returned Dharma body was attached directly to the Shaozi sword. He and the sword became one, and his magical power was pushed to the extreme. What he used was no longer the Shaozi sword lord, but the Li ferocious sword lord. Among the 6 pulse swords of Mount Shu, the Li ferocious sword lord had the strongest attack power. Endless cruel and ruthless cold light suddenly burst out from the Shaozi sword. Countless sword lights instantly filled the space where the two were fighting. And these sword lights all gathered together, turning into an extremely bright sword light. All the power was concentrated in one point, and it stabbed towards Shi Tianhao. The Li ferocious sword lord of Mount Shu only used one sword to kill. Either the enemy dies, or I perish. Shi Tianhao's right hand that was grabbing the blade suddenly burst into a mist of blood. Blood splattered all over the sky, and the majestic blood qi directly turned the surrounding thousands of miles into a lava furnace. Shao's sword lord's sword did not stop, and it stabbed violently into the right side of Shi Tianhao's chest. The Shao's sword lord's indestructible body could not be pierced deeply by the bright sword light of the Li ferocious sword lord, almost piercing through. But at the same time, Shi Tianhao's divine light of the end streaked across and landed on the Shao's sword venerable's primordial spirit. Suddenly, the resplendent sword light was cut off. It was as if someone had suddenly grabbed the sword light by its neck and twisted it. The junior sword venerate let out a wail of anguish as his return to void stage physique was jolted away from the junior sword venerate. Only the upper half of his return to void stage physique remained. Everything below the waist had been annihilated. The Shao's sword returned to its original form, its radiance dimming all of a sudden. There was a horizontal stripe on the body of the sword, and countless rays of light gushed out from it, as though a person was bleeding. This magic treasure at the peak of the incarnation stage was severely damaged by Shi Tianhao, and it was almost intercepted and broken. At this time, Shi Tianhao threw another punch, and the violent power of the Hong symbol formula erupted. At the same time, the Kunpeng Palace crashed down again. The two combined attacks sent the Shao's sword venerate's severely injured return to void stage physique flying backward. The remaining half of his body was covered in cracks, and finally, it shattered inch by inch. Shi Tianhao. The junior sword venerate's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. His return to void stage physique had been completely shattered by Shi Tianhao. 1,000 years of hard work had been destroyed in an instant. With his return to void stage physique shattered, his cultivation level directly fell back to the primordial spirit incarnation stage. After the previous sword venerate Guan Chong, another grandmaster sword master Guan, the junior sword venerate of the Shao's sword lineage, had been beaten by Xianmen Tianzong to the point that his cultivation level had fallen. However, the junior sword venerate was still powerless to take revenge. He could only grit his teeth and swallow his grievances. His body transformed into a sword light and quickly escaped. Shi Tianhao looked at him coldly and did not chase after him. He retracted his fist and used his uninjured left hand to grab the Shao's sword. Slowly, he pulled it out of the wound on his right chest. The Shao's sword vibrated violently, and sword light flashed as it resisted Shi Tianhao. Silently, Shi Tianhao said, "Do you want to break it completely?" He gripped it with his left hand, and the violent magic power caused the Shao's sword to tremble violently. The light from the horizontal pattern on the blade became more and more dazzling, while the sword light of the Shao's sword itself became dimmer. Pulling out the Shao's sword and holding it in his hand, Shi Tianhao once again activated the divine light of origin from between his eyebrows. It fell on his body, and the injuries on his right chest and right hand gradually healed. He returned to the Kunpeng Palace and sat down cross-legged, letting the Kunpeng Palace suppress the heavily injured Shao's sword. Then, he took out the few remaining tree trunks of the cloud forest to recover his magic power. Feeling that his magic power had more or less recovered, he once again activated the divine light of origin to help the Kunpeng Palace, which had been damaged by the Shao's sword, recover its damage. However, using the divine light of origin on someone else was much less effective than using it on himself. Shi Tianhao's expression was calm as he gazed in the direction of the Yunfeng Mirror Lake in the distance. The anxiety in his heart had already reached its peak, and he was afraid that he would still be a step too late. However, the more anxious he was, the more he wanted to recover to his peak state as soon as possible. Only then could he deal with the enemies who dared to invade his sect. Light suddenly flashed on the horizon. Shi Tianhao drove the Kunpeng Palace through the void and quickly arrived nearby. He saw that his sect's great formation was in operation. Within the formation, light, shadow, and mist fluctuated. He could vaguely see many people fighting inside. "I'm back." Shi Tianhao let out a long roar and rushed into the formation. However, as soon as he entered, he saw a scene that made him go mad with anger. Xiao Yan had activated the yin-yang burning sky formation, but it was not used to attack. Instead, it was used to defend himself. He was being besieged by Xiao Dongtian and the Black Heaven Seal. The immortal imperial flag and the 5 divine badges kept flashing brilliantly, helping him defend himself. However, at this moment, the brilliance was much dimmer. When the black heaven seal fell, it was as if a part of the sky had collapsed. With one collision, the 5 divine badges were sent flying. Seeing this scene, Shi Tianhao's eyes were almost spewing fire. Among his fellow disciples, he and Xiao Yan were the closest. Strictly speaking, the two of them were also the first 2 disciples under Lin Feng. When they were young, they had experienced danger and difficulties together. It could be said that their friendship was life-changing. In the past, when his parents returned to the Divine Land, they were intercepted and killed. When they were forced to hide in the void battlefield again, he was in seclusion. When Xiao Yan heard the news, he killed his way to the Yu clan to avenge his parents. At this moment, when Xiao Yan saw Shi Tianhao, his eyes lit up. He laughed and said, "You're back at the right time. Senior brother, I have something good for you." Immediately after, he shouted, "Sixth brother, send this kid to Jade Capital Mountain and give him what I prepared." Actually, there was no need for him to say anything. As soon as Shi Tianhao entered the formation immediately changed and directly sent him to Jade Capital Mountain. "Brat, it's a pity that there's no time for you to slowly figure it out. Whether you can succeed or not depends on you, but I believe you can." As Xiao Yan spoke, the last scene in Shi Tianhao's vision was his yin-yang burning sky formation teetering under the joint attack of Xiao Dongtian and the Black Heaven Seal. Shi Tianhao was directly sent to the branch of the mysterious Heaven Treasure Tree. There, Li Yuanfang's expression was solemn, but his eyes were still calm. He flicked his fingers continuously, and one Dharma art after another was sent into the yin-yang life and death formation. He did not have time to be polite and directly threw 2 porcelain bottles to Shi Tianhao. "This is the Demon King Qiongqi's true blood essence that Master prepared for you. This is also the 33 days fortune immortal pill that eldest senior brother gave you. Sixth senior brother, you've worked hard." Shi Tianhao did not waste any time. He received the 2 porcelain bottles and directly smashed one of them. Immediately, an extremely viscous and stinky black liquid floated in midair. Light and shadow flashed in the liquid. It had a pair of wings on its back and was covered in the fur of a hedgehog. It looked like a cow or a tiger, and its cry sounded like a dog's bark. It was one of the 4 great ancient ferocious beasts, Qiongqi. Light and shadow flashed above Shi Tianhao's head, and his heaven and earth idol appeared. The heaven and earth idol had 4 chaotic hole furnaces on its head. One of them was empty, and it was aimed at the Qiongqi blood essence. The black blood essence immediately entered it. Once the blood essence entered, it immediately turned into a torrential black stream of water. In an instant, it was refined by Shi Tianhao. His chaotic hole furnaces had already been refined to the extreme. Once he obtained enough quality Qiongqi blood essence, he would immediately be able to reach perfection. Within the 4 furnaces, the hurricane formed by the power of chaos, the black water formed by the power of Qiongqi, the earth formed by the power of Taotai, and the blue fire formed by the power of Taowu resonated together. At the same time, the vast power of the universe spread out. The eyes of each of the 4 heads of his heaven and earth idol shone with a bright light. The light from his left eye seemed to be the end of all things. Everywhere it passed, everything would be interrupted and ended prematurely, forced to draw a full stop. The light from his right eye seemed to be the starting point of all things. Everywhere it passed, everything would start anew and be born anew. The end point was also the starting point. Shi Tianhao also shattered the 2nd porcelain bottle. The 33 Heavens Fortune Immortal Pill that seemed to contain countless mysteries appeared in front of him. He swallowed it in one gulp. In the next moment, besides his heaven and earth idol, another light flashed above Shi Tianhao's head. It was a youth that looked exactly like Shi Tianhao when he was 15 or 16 years old. It was his Yuanying. 2 years in the vast thousand worlds was equivalent to more than 10 years for Shi Tianhao in the void battlefield. His cultivation had long since reached the peak of the late Yuanying stage. Yuanying was extremely strong, and he could even vaguely see the illusory Yuan spirit door in his sea of consciousness. However, after trying it out, he felt that the time was not right. Originally, he was not in a hurry because he had just turned 30. But today, with his sect facing numerous dangers, he wanted to break through the final barrier and prove his way to the soul. It was not for the false reputation of being the youngest soul formation cultivator in history, but because his sect needed him to become a soul cultivator right now so that he could help protect his fellow disciples. At that moment, Shi Tianhao only felt the illusory door become unprecedentedly clear. His vitality had reached an unprecedented peak. He could clearly feel that all he needed was a gentle push. Countless memories flashed through his head. When he was still a baby, someone had stolen his innards. He was in so much pain and helplessness when he was young. In the tiny mountain village, he forgot everything. He lived a carefree childhood. He became a disciple of his master and learned the way, spending time with his senior and junior brothers and sisters. In the fated battle in the dragon arena, he sought justice for himself. His joyous reunion with his grandfather, his worry for his parents who were still missing. The invading enemies before him, his fellow disciples in a bloody battle. All of this transformed into the purest and most primitive energy, and it condensed into an incomparably powerful will that pushed open the ethereal door of the nascent soul with a bang. Chapter 854. Although the anxiety and worry caused by the siege of his sect and the previous bloody battles had consumed a lot of his energy, it had also allowed Shi Tianhao to condense all of his Tao and will. His understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth had reached an unprecedented peak and rapidly improved. After refining Qiongqi's blood essence and swallowing the 33 Heavens Fortune Elixir, Shi Tianhao had completely broken through the last shackle and successfully pushed open the door to the primordial spirit. His yuanying turned into a stream of light and rushed into the Dharma form of heaven and earth. The huge Dharma form of heaven and earth merged completely with yuanying and rushed into the open door together. After passing through the door in the void and receiving the baptism of the great Tao of heaven and earth, Shi Tianhao's Dharma form of heaven and earth collapsed and turned into talisman seeds. Each seed was in harmony with the world and flashed with dazzling light. The light shadows of the four fierce beasts, Suani, Qiongqi, Taotai, and Hun Dun, also appeared in the void. They roared ferociously and enjoyed the baptism of the great Tao of heaven and earth. Their faces showed expressions of comfort. These light shadows quickly became clearer and clearer, as if they were going to materialize from illusion and revive together. But in next to no time, numerous obscure, primitive, and boundlessly vast primordial qi enveloped them completely, and then they fused once more into the numerous talisman seeds. The thousands of light shadows of the four fierce beasts struggled and roared together, but in the end, they could only fall into the talisman seeds. In the end, the thousands of talismans gathered together and turned into a huge Taiji diagram in the void that was half black and half white. The Taiji diagram was surrounded by waves of desolation qi. The Taiji diagram covered the sky and the earth. Wherever it went, it seemed to turn the world back into the primordial age. The phenomenon of Shi Tianhao's primordial spirit Tao shocked the entire Yujing mountain. Even the people who were fighting in the yin and yang life and death formation were alarmed. The next moment, a loud and clear song resounded throughout Yujing mountain. Calamity rises from the smoke and dust of the old, enter the Xianmen and return to the true. Swallow the black and yellow of heaven and earth, and the great demon god of the universe. After the song, the huge Taiji diagram suddenly turned into a thick pillar of qi that seemed clear and turbid. It fell toward Shi Tianhao's body, which was sitting on the branch of the mysterious heaven treasure tree. A strange stone suddenly flew out of a storage pouch that Shi Tianhao carried with him. Half of the stone was transparent and extremely clear, and there was a large amount of faint mist constantly swaying within it. The other half was like the heart of a living creature, gently beating, and there were veined patterns on its surface that looked like bloodlines. Laughter came from the thick pillar of air formed by Shi Tianhao's primordial spirit. Eldest brother, I've come back this time to bring you something good. After you get rid of these eyesores, you should take a good look at them. I'm sure you'll like them. Let me show you the effect first. The thick air pillar directly swept up Shi Tianhao's body and the strange stone. Then, the pillar of air shook violently. After a short moment, it turned back into the primordial Tai Chi diagram that covered the sky. The stone sword, Kuan Peng Hall, and the skull that originally belonged to Shi Tianyi were all thrown into the primordial Tai Chi diagram. The next moment, an earth-shattering thunder sounded. It was like the first thunder of the primordial era, when the world had just been born and the universe had just appeared. Then, the primordial Taiji diagram spun in the air and turned back into Shi Tianhao's appearance. On his forehead, the Taiji diagram flashed. He held a long sword that was round and made of stone. It was not sharpened, but it emitted an extremely sharp power intent as if it could split the world. The sword was a sharp Dharma treasure in the past. Later, after its Dharma treasure's primordial spirit was destroyed, it landed in Shi Tianhao's hands. At that moment, it had proven its Tao with Shi Tianhao and reopened its primordial spirit, becoming an essence soul Dharma treasure again. The huge Kuan Peng Hall floated above Shi Tianhao's head. Its power was unprecedentedly perfect. After Shi Tianhao proved his primordial spirit, the treasure could finally unleash its full power. On the other side of Shi Tianhao's body, there was a purple crown floating. Lightning crackled around it, resonating with the thunderclouds in the sky. Shi Tianhao's long black hair was still draped over his shoulders. He did not wear the purple crown, but this Dharma treasure, the purple crown, was a Dharma treasure that he had personally refined. It was closely related to him. Duo. Shi Tianhao growled. The purple crown and Kuan Peng Hall were put away, and his body turned back into the primordial Tai Chi diagram. In the center of the Tai Chi diagram, a figure suddenly appeared. It was Shi Tianhao's previous physical body. The primordial Tai Chi diagram once again turned into a pillar of air that seemed to be clear and turbid, piercing straight into the top of the body's head. Suddenly, a majestic and powerful chi and blood spread out. It was more dazzling than the sun, more profound than the starry sky. The powerful martial Tao conception condensed above Shi Tianhao's head, almost materializing. It was a desolate and ancient world. There were many ferocious beasts in the world, such as Baian, Cheong Qi, Hun Dun, Tao Tai, Ang Pu, Kuan Peng, and many others. Among them were many demons that Shi Tianhao had killed. The violent power shook the world. Shi Tianhao opened his eyes and grinned. He had succeeded. When a cultivator reached the nascent divinity realm, they could refine this treasure together with their nascent divinity and corporeal body. Those who succeeded in refining it could separate their corporeal body and nascent divinity at will. The primordial spirit could fuse with the physical body at any time, rapidly nourishing the physical body. The primordial spirit's dermic powers would all be transformed into chi and blood of the physical body. It would not be inconvenient for one to use martial Tao. The martial Tao will and one's essence, chi, and spirit would be in perfect harmony. When the primordial spirit was separated from the physical body would not deteriorate. After being absorbed by the primordial spirit incarnation, it would automatically be nourished. It would also not affect the incarnation's various transformations and the use of Dharma spells and supernatural powers. Sixth senior brother, send me into the array. Shi Tianhao weighed the stone sword in his hand and took a step forward. The power of his physical body's chi and blood that shook the world exploded. Cracks appeared in the space where he was. Li Yuanfang activated the yin and yang life and death array and directly sent Shi Tianhao into the array. Moreover, he was directly sent to Xiao Yan's side. The moment Shi Tianhao appeared, he did not say anything. The stone sword in his hand directly stabbed at the black heaven seal that was blasting towards Xiao Yan. The sword stabbed out. There was almost no time gap. The tip of the sword had already touched the black heaven seal. At this moment, everywhere the sword passed, the void shattered inch by inch. Shi Tianhao activated his martial Tao. The power of the sword's stabbing attack shocked even Xiao Dong Tian and the black heaven seal. The black heaven seal transformed into the blue sky and clashed head-on with Shi Tianhao's sword. The stone sword did not have any brilliance or sharpness, but it seemed indestructible. It forcibly shattered the black heaven seal's blue sky power concept. The black heaven seal smashed down, and the blue sky completely shattered. For a moment, it was as if the sky had collapsed. The entire sky turned upside down and smashed towards Shi Tianhao. It was the true power of the sky collapsing. The blue sky above Yujing Mountain seemed to envelop Shi Tianhao together. Boom! Shi Tianhao was unafraid. Majestic power erupted from his body. At the same time, the tip of the stone sword in his hand suddenly flashed with a bit of light. It was the power concept that seemed to be the end of all things. It was the light of the divine light of finality. Shi Tianhao's martial Tao, primordial soul, and physical strength combined with the power of the stone sword in his hand, which had become a Dharma treasure, and integrated it with his divine light of finality. It was as if he could even split the sky and cut down the stars. When the sword slashed out, it immediately split the sky formed by the power of the black heaven seal. Facing the black heaven seal's body that covered the sky, it did not retreat and continued to slash. An ear-piercing sound rang out. The black heaven seal, which had already been injured by Xianli, was sent flying by the power of Shi Tianhao's sword. A clear sword mark was left at the bottom of the black heaven seal. The black heaven seal grunted. Xiao Dongtian, who was fighting with Xiao Yan, also frowned slightly. After Xiao Yan, the second primordial soul adept, the disciple of the Mystic Gates master, Lin Feng, was born. The third primordial soul adept of Xianmen Tianzong's lineage was born. The little guy of the past, the young heaven's chosen one, the expert who battled the heavens and earth today, Shi Tianhao. Compared to Xiao Yan, who was injured and could not activate the 5-fire lotus, or even the yin-yang burning sky array and the 4-fire lotus, the current Shi Tianhao was even more ferocious. He was like a humanoid primordial beast. After repelling the black heaven seal with one sword, Shi Tianhao did not stop. With one step, he was already beside Xiao Yan. He punched with his empty left hand, which swept up the primordial martial Tao above his head and clashed head-on with Xiao Dongtian's powerful heaven's hand. Both of them retreated at the same time. Shi Tianhao held his sword and stood in front of Xiao Yan. Eldest senior brother, I'm back. Xiao Yan sat cross-legged in the void. At this moment, he stood up and walked up to stand side by side with Shi Tianhao. He smiled and said, "Brat, I knew you could do it." Shi Tianhao grinned and said, "Of course. If you can do it, why can't I?" Xiao Yan sneered and said, "You can continue bragging." Even though they were facing a strong enemy, the two of them stood side by side, fearless, talking and laughing calmly. Xiao Dongtian's expression was gloomy. He also came to the side of the black heaven seal and placed both his palms on it. The black heaven seal did not make a sound. It silently activated its own transcendence energy. The two powers supported each other and increased rapidly. Rise! Xiao Dongtian landed on the black heaven seal. The black heaven seal lifted him up into the sky. He looked down at Xiao Yan and Shi Tianhao from above. In the next moment, the sky collapsed again. It was as if the pillar that supported the heavens had collapsed. The sky came crashing down with the intent of destruction and impermanence, crashing down on Xiao Yan and the others. Xiao Dongtian stood on the top of the black heaven seal. He raised one hand to the sky and spread his fingers. The 5 elements of the great heaven's 7 planets true technique Taibai, Jupiter, Qinxing, Zhenxing, and Zhenxing were unleashed. He broke through the real galaxy in the sky and guided the power of the 5 element stars to descend. He transformed it into the power of the great palm of starfall and strengthened the black heaven seal. The power of the black heaven seal multiplied, and it was about to crush the void. Shi Tianhao's divine light of origin fell on Xiao Yan and helped him recover from part of his injuries. The two of them looked at each other and smiled at the same time. At this moment, the two of them simultaneously thought of something that happened many years ago. At that time, they had just become disciples of Lin Feng and traveled the world with Lin Feng. They were still two small qi refinement cultivators. They had escaped from the hands of monk Hui Ku, who was in the foundation establishment stage, and killed the giant snake that Hui Ku was raising together. Many things that had long been buried in the depths of their memories, big and small, suddenly appeared in their minds one by one. It was as if everything had happened just yesterday. Xiao Yan and Shi Tianhao laughed at the same time. "What are you afraid of?" Amidst the laughter, fire and lightning shot up into the sky. Chapter 855. Bluish-purple, black, gold, milky white, and gold flashed with red and blue lights. Xiao Yan's 5 great true fires turned into a sea of fire that filled the sky, almost turning the entire yin and yang life and death formation into a world of fire. Standing in the sea of fire, Xiao Yan shed his human form and transformed into the flaming Taiji diagram. After being illuminated by Shi Tianhao's divine light of origin, his injuries were not completely healed, but they were much better than before. As Shi Tianhao laughed, a thick pillar of qi that seemed both clear and turbid rushed out from the top of his body. After wrapping around his body, he did not reform into his human form, but transformed into the huge primordial Taiji diagram in the void. Within the Taiji diagram, the shadows of countless giant beasts floated up and down, and a purple crown that flashed with dazzling lightning appeared. Then, Shi Tianhao's primordial spirit incarnation swallowed the purple crown, and the lightning on the huge Taiji diagram shone even brighter. As the lightning on the primordial Taiji diagram shone even brighter, the sky above Mount Yujing in the vast thousand domains darkened. Dark clouds covered the sky, and thunder rumbled. Countless thick lightning snakes swam wildly, gathering above Mount Yujing from all directions. It was as if all the lightning in the world had gathered there. Terrifying lightning bolts fell one after another, like a torrential downpour. They were so dense that the sky above Mount Yujing turned into a lightning hell. There was lightning above, and a sea of fire below, sandwiching Shaodong Tian and the Black Heaven Seal in the middle. Feeling this terrifying power, Shaodongtian's 2 white eyebrows trembled. With a low roar, an astonishing brilliance surged from between his eyebrows. With this as the center, rays of brilliance shot out from his body, penetrating deep into the void, as if they were connected to a small world. Then, all the brilliance retracted, but the connected small world seemed to be dragged out of the void. These small worlds all gathered in the brilliance between Shaodongtian's eyebrows, gathering together to form a fruit of the way in the shape of a wheel of light. The true fruit of the great path of all heavens. This fruit of the way in the shape of a wheel of light suddenly began to spin, as if all heavens and realms were operating together, controlling the life and death of all things in the world. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that there was more than one small gap on the wheel of light. It was clearly not complete. But even so, the power was still extremely terrifying. Shaodongtian's fruit of the way was added to the Black Heaven Seal, and it immediately made the sky manifested by the Black Heaven Seal even more vast. It stopped the heavenly lightning from falling, and it continued to collapse, crushing the layers of flames. The flame Taiji diagram and the primordial Taiji diagram stood side by side in the void. The 2 avatars did not panic at all. Instead, they were filled with fighting spirit. 2 voices sounded at the same time. Qian. Huang. Thunder. Lai. As he spoke, the heavenly lightning and earthen fire immediately became even more majestic and berserk. They began to explode together, the lightning and fire constantly mixing and surging. Boom 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 boom. At this moment, tens of thousands of lightning bolts descended from the sky, twisting and twisting between the heavens and the earth. It was as if there were tens of thousands of lightning pillars connecting the heavens and the earth, flashing non-stop. Below, all kinds of flames soared into the sky, turning into thick pillars of fire that shot up to the 9 heavens. The pillars of lightning and fire kept colliding and shattering, turning into dancing lightning and flames that filled the sky, wreaking havoc. Endless lightning descended from the sky, as if the Emperor of Thunder had descended, cleansing all evil and filth in the world. Endless flames shot up into the sky, as if the god of fire had descended, destroying all evil in the world. The entire world became a world of lightning and fire, as if doomsday had arrived. Endless disasters, catastrophes, and destruction sounded the death knell of the enemies, wanting to bury them all. Under such violent attacks, even the sky manifested by Shao Dongtian and the Black Heaven Seal's dermic powers was torn apart. The blue sky shattered, turning into streaks of light that filled the sky. It was filled with the feeling of being at the end of the road, as if the heavens were really collapsing. Shao Dongtian and the Black Heaven Seal let out a muffled grunt at the same time. Countless rays of light burst out from Shao Dongtian's avatar, as if blood was spurting out from all the pores on his body. The Black Heaven Seal was even more charred. Shao Dongtian gritted his teeth and took out another true fruit of the great Tao of the heavens. This time, the Tao fruit suddenly expanded, turning into a damaged giant wheel of light that protected him and the Black Heaven Seal. This time, he switched to the Black Heaven Seal to assist Shao Dongtian, adding all his spiritual power to the wheel of light that Shao Dongtian released. An extremely majestic concept of power that covered the heavens and suppressed the myriad worlds was released. Although it was incomplete, it still shook the world. The ancient heavenly gate's supreme divine ability, the heavenly wheel. When Shao Dongtian executed this divine ability, it actually faintly revealed a trace of the great heavenly wheel of creation magic treasure. The wheel of light suddenly spun, distorting the time and space of the heavens, isolating the lightning and fire. However, Shao Dongtian's face was exceptionally pale, and his injuries showed signs of worsening. His heavenly will divine ability was incomplete. Not only was its might not at its peak, but it was also a huge burden on himself. At this moment, facing the continuous heavy pressure from Shao Yan and Shi Tianhao, he felt a bit like how Shao Yan had faced the falling rocks and barely controlled the incomplete version of the five-colored sky fiery lotus. Although he had defeated his opponents, he was constantly injured. Although I guessed that the disciple of the Master of the Mysterious Gate would be extraordinary after attaining the primordial divinity, I didn't expect that he would have such a powerful divine ability. What's more, he was only at the late Yuanying realm before, but he made a breakthrough while we were attacking the mountain. This is ridiculous. On Yujing Mountain, Li Yuanfang saw that Shao Yan and Shi Tianhao had joined hands to fight against Shao Dongtian and the Black Heaven Seal. The only obvious disadvantage they had before was equalized, and they were even gradually gaining the upper hand. Li Yuanfang, who had always been calm, felt a little relieved. However, at this moment, the yin and yang life and death formation suddenly shook violently. An extremely sharp and invincible sword intent broke through the formation from the outside. A tall, skinny old man stepped into the yin and yang life and death formation with an ordinary cyan steel long sword in his hand. His sword chi soared into the sky. His intervention made the yin and yang life and death formation, which had been wrestling with the experts in the formation, slightly lose balance. The highest elder of Mount Shu sword sect, Jia Luoshi. As he opened and closed his eyes, a cold light flashed. He looked around and finally fixed his eyes on Shao Yan and Shi Tianhao. One of them had made him lose face before, and the other had seriously injured the junior sword venerable while he was recuperating. Looking at Shao Yan and Shi Tianhao, Jia Luoshi did not say a word and directly used the junior sword weapon, which traveled through time and space to kill the two's primordial divinities. However, a fierce clear light flashed across the sky and cut off the cold light activated by his junior sword weapon. Then, the light slashed toward him. Almost as soon as Jia Luoshi appeared, Xian Li's emotionless eyes looked over. Although Jia Luoshi did not use the heavenly immortal sword Qi, Xian Li still felt the aura that she naturally hated. Facing Xian Li's sword light, Jia Luoshi did not dare to be careless. Although his sword heart was unstable and it was a heavy burden on him, 81 heavenly immortal sword Qi appeared immediately and turned into the 9 revolutions immortal Tao fruit to meet Xian Li's terrifying heaven-punishing sword light. The heaven-punishing sword light was invincible. Jia Luoshi's 9 revolutions immortal Tao fruit had also been cut off by the fierce clear light. Jia Luoshe was expressionless. He stabbed the cyan steel long sword into his 9 revolutions immortal Dao fruit, and the mysterious and powerful power of the Dao fruit condensed on the sword. The ordinary cyan steel sword turned into a white sword chi. The body of the sword was like a coiling dragon, and 81 terrifying sword chi circled around it. Each sword chi went around 9 revolutions. Blood flashed in Xian Li's clear eyes. The clear light condensed into a line and turned into an even more ferocious blood-red sword light. It cut off the white sword chi in Jia Luoshe's hand. Countless rays of light exploded and filled the surroundings. Endless sword chi shot out crazily, and the others who were fighting had to be careful. Seeing this, Jia Luoshe's eyes lit up. Countless complex emotions flashed across them. Anger, hatred, worry, desire, ecstasy. He suddenly formed a sword seal with his left hand and used his body to withstand Xian Li's terrifying sword light. But strangely, the heaven-punishing sword light did not cause any damage to Jia Luoshe's body. However, the wrinkles on Jia Luoshe's face became deeper, and his tall and thin body, which had always been straight, became slightly hunched. Seeing this, everyone in Xianmen Tianzong was stunned. The heaven-punishing sword returned without any results. Before the immortal dragon city reached the creation realm, its defense was already extremely powerful. However, it was still very difficult to resist the heaven-punishing sword. In the Battle of West Hill City, the sect leader of Shu Mountain Sect, Xian Longsheng, could only face the heaven-punishing sword head-on. He did not dare to let the sword light touch him. In the void outside the Xiantian realm, the underworld hall master Su Anda and Xian Li fought for a short time. Su Anda had used 2 life and death nether Dao fruits, which was equivalent to 2 primordial soul integration stage cultivators joining forces. Only then did he barely manage to withstand Xian Li's sword. The heaven-punishing sword had improved compared to before. Previously, it could suppress the reincarnation sect leader Shi Tianfang and the 6 paths of reincarnation Dharma treasure, the 6 paths of reincarnation sect leader. But now, Jia Luoshe did not even have a normal defense, let alone attack. It was equivalent to taking Xian Li's sword head-on. It's not his own ability. He has some special treasure on him. Xiao Yan and the others quickly realized that Shu Mountain had indeed come prepared this time. Xian Li was temporarily restrained by Jia Luoshe. The most direct impact was that Shi Tianfang and the 6 paths of reincarnation were released. After taking a look at Jia Luoshe and Xian Li, Shi Tianfang did not stop. He attacked the yin and yang life and death array with the 6 paths of reincarnation. He was ready to break out of the array and land on the Jade Capital Mountain. The situation suddenly became critical again. At this time, the void outside the yin and yang life and death formation split open, and several figures walked out of it. The one in the lead had white hair fluttering behind his back, and his expression was cold and indifferent. He was Wang Lin, who had rushed back from the southern wasteland without stopping for thousands of miles. Wang Lin was still in the late Yuanying realm, but his eyes were shining. Compared to the past, there seemed to be something more. Behind him, Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, and Kang Nanhua stood side by side in a row. Wang Lin did not look back. He directly stepped into the array and said calmly, "5th junior brother, you go to the All Heavens Hall. 4th junior sister, Mr. Kang, and I will enter the array." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.